The entire world had to gather an army just to try to kill Road, and there was a reason for that. He had become the most powerful necromancer in the world, commanding billions of undead. But in the middle of the battle, a forbidden spell sends Road 20 years back in time. Now he's back in the body of the useless kid who could barely control mana, surrounded by people who still see him as a failure. The power is gone, the knowledge remains. And Road already knows where to find powerful monsters, where great legends were buried, and most importantly, how to make them all kneel before him. In the middle of a violent storm, with lightning tearing across the sky, a massive army prepares for the final confrontation on the battlefield. One of the armored warriors shouts furiously, ordering everyone to kill Road for daring to use forbidden arts and calling him a true monster. High in the sky, the silhouette of a dark dragon emerges between the lightning bolts as a voice echoes, declaring that he is Road himself. With the power of darkness surrounding his hand, he admits that this is exactly how everyone sees him, as a monster. Before the enemy army, a gigantic creature surrounded by flames and blue ores reveals its terrifying form. Surrounded by energy and wrapped in a black cloak, Road watches the battlefield, knowing exactly why everyone fears him. As magic fills the area, he remembers that the reason everyone calls him a monster is actually quite simple. After all, this young man is none other than the one and most powerful necromancer in the entire world. Under his command, a legion of undead and knights surrounded by blue energy advances against the enemy forces. The army of darkness crashes head-on into the human troops, beginning a battle of enormous proportions. Desperate, the enemy leaders surrounded by blazing ores order everyone to attack Road without mercy. The mages channel their power into a fire attack, shouting that forbidden magic like he should never exist in this world. A rain of blazing meteors falls from the sky directly toward Road in an attempt to destroy him once and for all. Without losing his composure, the necromancer closes his eyes as the black and blue aura around his body intensifies. Determined to end the battle, he fires a massive beam of energy to test his mysterious forbidden spell against all of them. But suddenly, the battlefield begins to blur, and a gentle voice can be heard in the background calling for young Master Road. His vision returns to normal and reveals a worried maid, causing the still confused young man to call her by name. Leah confirms it and gently tells him that it is already time for breakfast, while Rude looks at his reflection in the mirror. When he places his hand against the glass and sees small sparks of mana appearing, he realizes that something extraordinary has happened. Staring at his much younger appearance, Road finally realizes that he has returned 20 years into the past. In his previous life, at 32 years old, he died in his original world and ended up being transported to another dimension. There, Road became the only necromancer mastering forbidden arts and commanding billions of undead. His power reached such an absurd level that when he tried to cast an incomplete forbidden spell against the enemy alliance, he ended up regressing through time. Seeing Road still standing there, Lee asks him to hurry and warns that the master of the house will punish him if he is late. With a calm smile, Road apologizes and tells the maid to go ahead, assuring her that he will come down shortly. Lee is surprised by his behavior, unable to believe that the previously cold and cowardly young master just smiled at her. Walking through the luxurious hallways, Road remembers that he is the youngest son of Baron Morris, a member of a declining noble family in the Tatus Kingdom. He also remembers that in his previous life, his family was completely destroyed without him being able to do anything to stop it. Although he has lost all the magical power he once possessed, his memories as a necromancer remain intact, and Road intends to use them to change the future. When he enters the grand dining hall, he finds the entire family gathered around the table while the maids serve the meal. His father, Baron Shiro Morris, looks at him sternly and asks whether he is late again because he plans to make excuses and skip his studies. Road pulls out his chair, apologizes to his father, and firmly says that he no longer intends to avoid his lessons. He promises that he will not miss another lesson from now on, while finding it almost nostalgic to see his father's stern face again after so many years. Watching the Baron during the meal, Road wonders how a family led by someone so disciplined ended up falling into complete ruin. His older brother, Leo Morris, scolds him, saying that he cannot remain lazy if he wants to inherit the family name in the future. Road's sister quickly intervenes, gently asking Leo not to be so hard on their younger brother. Sif Morris places a piece of chicken on her brother's plate and tells him to eat, making Road thank her as he remembers how caring she always was. But he also remembers that Sif was forced into a political marriage and eventually sacrificed to demons in his previous life. This time, Road intends to save her. The sound of high heels echoes through the hall and draws everyone's attention at the table. An imposing woman dressed in black enters and sternly asks whether Road is late once again. She is Lady Della Morris. Worried, Sif tries to defend her brother, saying it was her fault because she had been teaching Road magical theory until late at night. Della immediately interrupts her and tells her daughter to stop making excuses to protect him. The woman makes it clear that the family has no room for parasites and gives Road 1 week to master magic or be expelled. Sif is shocked by the demand and points out that even Leo, who was considered a prodigy, took an entire month to become an apprentice mage at that age. Della counters by saying that Leo and Sif mastered magic much earlier and threatens to expel her own daughter if she keeps arguing. Unable to respond to that threat, Sif lowers her head and remains silent. To everyone's surprise, Road accepts the 1 week challenge, leaving his sister desperate over his decision. Still calm, he looks at his mother with a challenging smile and asks what he will receive if he manages to master magic within the deadline. Mockingly, Della replies that she will grant any request he makes if he actually manages to accomplish such a feat. Road accepts the deal and asks for permission to enter the legendary Tomb of Heroes if he fulfills his promise. Hearing that unexpected request, Baron Shiro Morris raises an eyebrow, surprised by his son. The patriarch agrees to the challenge and promises to allow Road into the tomb if he truly masters magic within 7 days. Della simply scoffs at the boy's ambition and tells him to start packing his bags for when he is expelled from the Morris family. As soon as they leave the hall, Sif runs after Road and desperately asks why he picked a fight instead of simply apologizing. She reminds him that not even Leo could accomplish something like that in just 1 week. Worried, Sif grabs her brother and tells him that she has saved enough money for him to live comfortably outside the family, asking him to wait for her. The girl runs off to get her savings, leaving Road embarrassed when he realizes that even his own sister has absolutely no faith in his chances. Scratching his head, he admits that if he had not regressed, he would probably doubt himself as well. Now in the garden, Road stretches and concludes that it is finally time to put his plans into action and change the future. He knows that the Tomb of Heroes is the best place to summon undead because he remembers a legendary figure resting there. Since he still cannot enter the tomb, Road heads into the forest behind the castle in search of a boss monster. After searching the area, he finds a carcass of a creature known as the Alpha Earth Ripper. Assessing his current condition, Road realizes that his mana is weak and barely reaches the level of an apprentice mage, a consequence of his lack of training during childhood. He remembers that the strength of mages is divided into 8 main realms, beginning with apprentice and novice and eventually reaching the legendary level. In his previous life, Road was a necromancer who had far surpassed the legendary level and was considered the strongest of them all. Even though he can currently maintain only 1 undead, he knows that this former novice level boss will be more than enough to impress his family. Road extends his hand, his eyes glowing with magic, and orders his new servant to awaken from its eternal slumber. A blue flame made of soul energy ignites as he demands the creature's submission. The forest floor begins to crack and tremble under the force of the summoning magic. Gigantic skeletal claws burst through the ground, announcing the monster's awakening. The massive carcass of the Earth Ripper comes back to life and lets out a deafening roar as it rises. The skeletal monster approaches Road, making the enormous difference in size between them even more obvious. Before the legendary Necromancer, the creature bows respectfully and recognizes Road as its master. With a cold gaze, he examines his new servant and confirms that the ritual worked. The Earth Ripper retains powerful abilities, including lava charge and seismic eruption. As a necromancer, Road can also use the abilities of his summons, so he decides to test the Hell Roar spell. He channels energy into his hands and fires a powerful mystical blast at the target in front of him. The attack strikes the stone structure and blasts a massive crater into the rock. After the demonstration, the monster praises its master's greatness, while Road appears satisfied with the result. Since his current mana only allows him to maintain 1 monster, he reabsorbs the creature into his body, knowing that he still needs to grow much stronger. Road concludes that simply summoning the Earth Ripper should already be enough to make his mother stop pressuring him for the time being. The Tomb of Heroes has existed since before the founding of the Titus Kingdom and serves as the resting place of great heroes from the past. Ancient powers remain sealed there, and talented young people capable of impressing those souls can receive a legendary blessing. Road remembers that Leo received one of those blessings and became a standout in the royal army, which also helps explain his mother's contempt for him. But after being such a powerful necromancer, Road is not interested in just receiving a blessing. What he truly wants is the entity sleeping inside that tomb. Back at the castle, the silence of the estate is broken by someone shouting Road's name. Sif appears angrily and pulls her brother by the ear, demanding to know why he did not wait for her as they had agreed. She tells Road to keep a low profile for a few days and avoid provoking their mother, promising to try convincing Della to abandon the idea of expelling him. Road simply smiles and assures her that she does not need to worry, because he would never allow himself to be expelled and leave her behind. Hearing that from her younger brother, Sif becomes emotional and spends a few moments unsure of what to say. Shortly afterward, Lee comes running down the stairs to announce that the young master's magic lesson is about to begin. Road says goodbye to his sister and asks Lee to take him to the classroom before following the maid. Watching her brother leave, Sif remains worried and concludes that she will have to beg their mother for mercy no matter what. The scene shifts to the academy classroom, where several noble students are already seated at their desks. As soon as Road enters, Baron Anta's youngest son begins mocking him, saying that the useless boy finally decided to show up before getting expelled. The other students burst into laughter and join in mocking Road. Professor Ryu interrupts the commotion, announces that class has already started, and tells Road to hurry to his seat. As he walks toward his desk, he remembers how he was humiliated every day in his previous life because he could not control mana. Apparently, nothing has changed. To everyone's surprise, Road bows politely to Professor Ryu and apologizes for being slightly late. The professor is confused by the respectful greeting, since such refined behavior is nothing like the Road he used to know. Road settles into his seat without paying any attention to the whispers and ridicule around him. Sitting beside him, Baron Anta's son looks at him with contempt, irritated by his new attitude and calling him a hypocrite. Ryu begins the lesson by explaining that mana is a mysterious force, while magic is the way they are able to use it. By learning to control mana, each person can specialize in classes such as mage, healer, magic swordsman, or shadow assassin. The professor further explains that mastering magic turns someone into an apprentice mage, allowing them to gradually advance all the way to the level of holy mage. One of the students raises her hand and asks about the legendary level of legendary mage. Riga replies that such mages are considered living myths and symbols of their nations, as well as the dream of every practitioner. The problem is that they have practically become legends, and the Tatis kingdom has not produced a legendary mage in more than 700 years. The professor emphasizes that everyone there must master mana before the age of 13 to secure their future and avoid falling behind. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Baron Anta's son points at Rode, reminds everyone that someone in the classroom still cannot control mana. He continues mocking him, saying that Rode has attended those lessons for 3 years and still has not managed to master it. Without losing his composure, Rode replies that it is none of his business and assures him that he will master magic in just 1 week. The boy bursts into laughter and repeats the declaration to the entire classroom, treating Rode's promise like a complete joke. The other students join in and begin laughing at Rode's claim. Disappointed, Rigu thinks that Rode seemed to have matured, but perhaps he is still the same arrogant boy as before. Rode, on the other hand, prefers not to reveal his power yet. After all, showing that he learned magic in a single day would probably terrify everyone. That night, the scene returns to the Moore's family castle, where a tense conversation takes place inside Lady Della's chambers. While drinking tea, Della asks Sif what brought her to her room so late. Standing before her mother, the girl begs her not to expel Rode from the Morris family. Della reacts immediately and while pouring more tea, irritably asks why Sif is begging for that useless boy. She argues that the family still possesses its noble pride and reminds her that both Leo and Sif learned magic at a very young age. She then complains that Rode is already 12 years old and that House Morris cannot support someone lazy who only pursues pleasure. Pointing at her daughter, Della ends the conversation without leaving any room for argument. After her mother turns away, Sif remains there speechless, unsure of what will happen to her younger brother. 7 days pass, and the day of the test finally arrives, with the academy students gathered in the courtyard before their noble families. The evaluator announces that their relatives will watch everything from the windows and tells the students to show the results of their training. Watching from a window, Della scoffs at the evaluation and tells Sif that Rode will only disgrace the family name once again. Sif looks anxiously toward the courtyard, hoping that her brother can truly pass the test. Down below, Baronada's arrogant son steps forward excitedly, saying that he has waited several days to watch Rode be humiliated. Full of confidence, he announces that he will show the useless boy what real magic looks like. Specialized as an elemental mage, the boy channels his flames and casts the fire explosion spell to demonstrate his power. The blazing sphere races across the courtyard at high speed and heads directly toward the stone pillar used for the test. The attack hits the target directly, causing a large fiery explosion. Proud of the result, the boy mocks Rode and challenges him to show what he managed to learn during that week. Rode is not intimidated. He steps forward and announces that it is his turn. A dark skull-shaped door appears behind him as he concentrates his magical power. Completely calm, Rode extends his arm and prepares his spell in front of everyone. Seeing this, his rival begins laughing and taunts Rode, saying that he cannot even control mana and will soon be crying from embarrassment. From the window, one of the noblewomen asks Della whether it is true that she intends to expel her own son if he fails. Della coldly replies that a lazy person only brings shame to the family and that, in that case, Rode would be better off leaving for good. In the courtyard, Rode closes his eyes for a moment and internally calls upon the power of his earth, Ripper Servant. The creature's silhouette appears as mystical energy, and Rode casts the powerful Hellroar spell. With no intention of holding back, he fires a massive beam of blue energy at the target. Charlie turns pale when he sees it, unable to understand when Rode learns such a powerful spell. The attack tears across the courtyard like a blue meteor and strikes the stone pillar directly. The force is enough to make the target explode and completely shatter into pieces. From above, Sif covers her mouth in shock before quickly celebrating when she sees that her brother actually succeeded. The other students stare in disbelief because Rode destroyed the target that even his rival had failed to break. Rigu also stares at the scene in astonishment, unable to understand how someone who just learned to control mana can release so much power. Humiliated and consumed by envy, the young noble refuses to accept that Rode's spell was so much stronger than his own. Beside Della, one of the noblewomen sarcastically comments that her lazy son seems to possess quite a lot of talent. Beaming with joy, Sif turns toward her mother and points at the courtyard, celebrating her brother's success. Rode simply adjusts his clothes indifferently, completely unconcerned with all the commotion around him. Sif happily waves from the window while Della remains motionless, still shocked by what she just witnessed. Unable to accept the result, his rival approaches Rode and demands to know how someone considered useless managed to use fire magic. He accuses Rode of cheating, reminding everyone that he constantly skipped class and never studied. The students begin whispering among themselves, also finding it strange that Rode suddenly learned magic of that level. Desperate to diminish Rode's achievement, his rival accuses him of stealing some magical item from the family's treasury to cast the spell. Rode gives him a cold look and asks exactly what he is implying, finally calling his rival by name Charlie Anta. Charlie smiles and argues that magical items consume huge amounts of mana, meaning Road would be unable to cast that attack a second time. Road turns toward Regu and asks what the professor thinks about the accusation. The teacher hesitates before admitting that Charlie's suspicion makes sense, especially because of the enormous mana consumption. The students begin whispering again, now suspicious that Road really might have used a magical artifact to cheat. Watching from the window, Sif is devastated by the thought that her brother may have stolen a magical item after refusing her help. She knows that cheating like this would only make their parents even more disappointed in Road. Not wanting the situation to get worse, Sif gathers her courage and decides to intervene. She runs into the courtyard and asks Rikyu not to blame her younger brother. Trying to protect him, Sif takes the blame and lies by saying that she was the one who gave Road the magical artifact. Before his sister can make the situation even worse, Road grabs her arm and stops her from continuing. Remaining confident, he calmly asks Sif to leave the matter in his hands. Road turns back to Rikyu and asks whether casting the same spell again would be enough to prove that he did not use any artifact. The professor agrees and confirms that if Road can repeat the spell, his innocence will be proven. Road accepts the condition with a smile as sparks of mystical energy begin surrounding his body. The students retreat in fear when they feel the powerful pressure of the mana he releases. Without hesitation, Road fires a second beam of magic, this time even more powerful than before. Seeing the new attack, Charlie panics and realizes that Road truly was not using any artifact. With ease, Road moves his hands and already begins preparing another spell. Charlie turns pale and freezes, unable to react to the boy's true level of power. The magic strikes the stone target and completely destroys it with a massive explosion. Humiliated and unable to respond, Charlie collapses to the ground, incapable of understanding how he was surpassed. The other students stare at Road in disbelief, wondering whether this is really the same useless boy they all used to mock. Satisfied, Sif looks at Della and asks whether she will finally stop talking about expelling Road from the family. Della accepts the result but warns that the family will not continue tolerating Road if he ever becomes lazy again. Rikyu turns toward the students and officially declares that Road did not use any magical artifact during the test. With the sun setting on the horizon, the dust from the test finally begins to settle over the Morris family castle. Later, inside the castle hall, Leo congratulates his younger brother on the result while Sif stands beside him with a huge smile. Road thanks him and learns that his sister spent the rest of the day telling everyone about what he accomplished. The entire family gathers around the dining table to celebrate the result of the test. Shiro praises his son's performance and says that Road made the Morris family very proud that day. Road thanks his father and asks whether the promise to allow him into the Tomb of Heroes still stands. Shiro confirms that he will honor their agreement. The tomb will open in 1 month and he will secure a spot for his son. Della intervenes and reminds him that the spot is expensive, so she expects Road to obtain a powerful blessing and make the investment worthwhile. The Baron also announces that from now on, Road will receive the same resources and training given to Leo and Sif. The boy bows respectfully and thanks his father for the privileges granted to him by the Morris family. Internally, Road celebrates finally securing his entrance into the tome, knowing that his necromancy will give him an enormous advantage in that place. He remembers that a legendary magic swordsman from the primordial era is buried there, and he intends to turn him into his next summon. Meditating in his room, Road realizes that he will need to increase his mana to summon that soul before it disappears completely. With the new resources provided by his father, he finally has the opportunity to raise his power as much as possible. 1 month of intense training passes until Lee appears at his door and tells him that the master of the house wishes to see him. Road prepares for the next step, satisfied that he reached the intermediate stage of apprentice mage during that month. Shiro announces that the Tomb of Heroes will open that day and tells Leo to accompany Road since he knows the place and can explain all the rules of the ritual. Leo accepts his father's order without hesitation and takes responsibility for guiding his brother. Shortly afterward, the group travels to the tomb in a carriage moving along a road surrounded by forest. During the journey, Leo starts a conversation and asks Road whether he knows the ranking system for the blessings granted in the hero's cemetery. Road remains silent and listens carefully to what his brother has to explain. Leo explains that the blessings are divided into 5 levels: white, blue, purple, gold, and the extremely rare red. The higher the rarity, the greater the power received, potentially even opening the path for someone to become a grandmaster. Curious, Road asks which blessing Leo obtained in the past, and his brother humbly replies that he received only a purple blessing. Internally, Road is impressed. A blessing of that level explains why Leo stood out so much and earned great merit shortly after joining the royal army. Sif also praises her brother, pointing out that obtaining any blessing is already extremely difficult, while Leo simply sighs and says that he still considers himself weak. She then turns toward Road and demands that he obtain at least 1 blessing since an opportunity this valuable cannot be wasted. Road tells his sister to relax, but internally he finds the situation amusing, knowing that she would lose her mind if she discovered that his true objective has nothing to do with receiving a blessing. It does not take long for the carriage to arrive at the imposing gates of the sanctuary, which are heavily protected by armed guards. The Tome of Heroes is a dark place covered in mist, filled with ancient statues and surrounded by a mysterious atmosphere. Before Road enters, Leo warns him that he will have exactly 3 hours inside and that earning the recognition of a heroic soul will depend entirely on his own performance. As Rude walks alone toward the entrance, Sif silently hopes that her brother can obtain at least the simplest blessing. She continues watching Road walk away, clearly anxious about the outcome. Inside the tome, Road crosses an enormous cemetery covered in mist and surrounded by gravestones and statues of ancient warriors. With a confident smile, he knows that the moment he has been waiting for has finally arrived. Road remembers Leo's advice to search for the most luxurious tomes since they belong to great mages from the past and usually offer rare blessings. However, he walks straight past one of those imposing tomes without showing the slightest interest. Leo's advice makes sense for ordinary people, but Road possesses the memories of his previous life and knows that the true legend is buried in a forgotten, nameless grave. Upon finding the small mound of earth, he kneels respectfully and apologizes for disturbing the warrior's rest. His expression changes as dark energy and cracks of mana begin appearing around his body. Using necromancy, Road orders the ancient hero to awaken from his eternal slumber and bow before him. The remaining soul tries to resist his command and releases a powerful shockwave, which only irritates Road because of its resistance. He releases his necromantic pressure and reasserts his authority as the king of the dead, the most powerful necromancer of all, capable of forcing any undead to obey him. Unable to continue resisting, the soul finally gives in and materializes as a legendary warrior surrounded by spiritual flame as a legendary magic blade. With his eyes glowing blue, Road gives the spirit a simple order to kneel. Unable to defy the authority of the king of the dead, the warrior grips his sword, bows, and recognizes Road as his new master. Road asks the summoned soul whether it can still remember the name it had while alive. The spirit replies that it has completely forgotten its former identity and humbly asks its new sovereign to give it another name. Satisfied with the summon's loyalty, Road smiles slightly and decides to name him on the spot. He names the powerful warrior spirit Bonecrown Bladeseat, permanently sealing the pact between them. Shortly afterward, the sound of heavy footsteps begins echoing from the cemetery entrance. A new group enters the area consisting of an elderly man, a light-haired young woman, and a heavily armed guard. The elderly man reminds the young Eleanor that because she belongs to the noble house Ashblade, she will surely earn the favor of some hero, and he demands that she obtain at least a purple blessing. The guard agrees and advises Eleanor to head directly toward the larger tomes, where powerful ancient leaders capable of granting high-level blessings are buried. Confident in her abilities, the girl accepts the advice and quickly leaves to begin her search. A short time later, Eleanor finds the impressive statue and gravestone of the great hero Els. Recognizing the monument, she is shocked to discover that Ills was a peak grandmaster, someone who had been only one step away from reaching the sage level. In another part of the Tome of Heroes, a blue-haired girl quickly makes her way across the dark grounds. Suddenly, a violent wave of blue energy erupts from the ground and draws the attention of everyone nearby. The guard immediately draws his sword and rushes to protect the girl, warning her about a powerful undead presence. A mysterious figure in a black cloak, surrounded by a blue aura, moves rapidly along the path. The girl and the guard realize that the figure is only a child and assume that he also came there in search of a blessing. Sword in hand, the guard looks at Road and asks whether that undead aura is coming from him. Observing the boy's stance, the man is surprised to notice that the child is already a Novus magic swordsman. Fearing that something is wrong, the guard tells the girl to be careful and suspects that Road may have been possessed by a vengeful spirit from the Tome. He charges forward at high speed with his sword covered in electricity to neutralize the supposed threat. Road remains calm before the attack, accompanied by the shadow of his new servant, the legendary Bladeseat. Instead of relying on any powerful magic, he simply bends down and picks up a stick from the ground. Road hands the stick to his servant and tells him to handle the situation. The guard attacks with full force, unleashing a powerful downward strike with his electrified greatsword. To the attacker's surprise, Road's shadow blocks the blow, using nothing more than the simple stick. With a quick and precise movement, the summon disarms the warrior and knocks him down without difficulty. The guard is left completely speechless, unable to accept that he was just defeated by a piece of wood. Road's shadow stares at the fallen man, maintaining a threatening stance despite holding nothing more than the stick. The blue-haired girl panics when she sees her uncle Leon, a Novus magic swordsman, defeated by a child using a stick. She stares at Road, unable to understand how someone who appears to be the same age as her can possess such incredible power. Angry and frightened, the girl points at him and demands to know his identity, revealing that she belongs to the influential Ashblade family. Before she can continue, the deep voice of an elderly man interrupts the argument and tells the young woman to show more respect. Surprised, she turns around and realizes that her grandfather has decided to intervene. The elderly man wearing glasses studies Road very cautiously. Analyzing what just happened, he realizes that even he would not be able to defeat Leon so easily using only a stick. Unable to accept his defeat, Leon gets back up and asks his master for permission to face the boy one more time. Furious, he draws his sword, determined to prove that his first defeat was nothing more than an accident. Leon launches another attack, concentrating all of his electrical mana into the blade. He unleashes a rapid series of strikes, trying every possible way to break through Road's defense. Bladeseat dodges every attack with ease and responds with a swift counterattack. The tip of the stick stops directly in front of the guard's throat as Rude warns him that if he tries again, he will be buried in that very place. The girl's grandfather is shocked to see that Road won without spending a single drop of mana, relying only on flawless swordsmanship. After realizing the boy's level, the old man steps forward and asks him to show mercy. The elderly man bows respectfully before Road and apologizes for failing to stop his subordinate earlier. Beneath his hood, Road immediately understands that the old man deliberately allowed the fight to happen in order to test his true strength. In a stern tone, the patriarch orders Leon to come forward and apologize to the boy immediately. Ashamed, the guard bows before Road and apologizes for acting so recklessly. Internally, Leon is terrified after realizing that he was surpassed by a boy using nothing more than basic swordsmanship. Road simply waves his hand and says that everything is fine since nobody was injured in the fight. Impressed, the elderly man begins addressing Road as a senior veteran and claims that only a grandmaster would be capable of doing something similar. Eleanor watches everything in disbelief, unable to believe that her own grandfather is calling a boy her age a senior veteran. Road pretends to be modest beneath his hood and says that he simply got lucky, even though he knows Bladeseat was a true legend at his peak. The elderly man laughs and considers Road far too humble for someone who just displayed such incredible strength. He introduces himself as Igna Ashblade, patriarch of the powerful Ashblade family, and introduces granddaughter Eleanor. Eleanor bows deeply before Road and apologizes for her earlier lack of manners. Curious, Igna asks whether Road belongs to the royal court, convinced that such a powerful young man could only come from an important family. Road asks to simply be called by his name and says that he does not belong to any faction, while remembering the importance of the Ashblades in the north. Igna is surprised to discover that someone so talented has no connection to any major power and immediately sees an opportunity to bring him to his side. Eleanor tries to start a friendly conversation and asks whether Road also came to the tome in search of a heroic blessing. She blushes slightly and tries to correct her question, finding it difficult to believe that someone so powerful has not already received a blessing. Suddenly, Igna begins coughing violently, alarming everyone around him. Leon and Eleanor rush over to help him, worried about the patriarch's condition. Noticing a dark aura surrounding the old man, Road identifies that he has been afflicted by an evil spirit curse. Desperate, Leon asks whether Road knows what is happening, explaining that no healer has ever managed to discover the true cause. Crying, Eleanor explains that her grandfather was ambushed by demons decades ago and has never managed to free himself from that curse. Road calmly explains that the curse was indeed caused by demons and that very few people know how to treat something like this. With tears in her eyes, Eleanor regains hope and asks whether Road knows any way to cure her grandfather. Igna looks at his granddaughter in surprise at how desperately she is asking for help from a young man they only just met. Eleanor begs Road for help and promises that the Ashblade family will do anything if he manages to save her grandfather. Internally, Road celebrates the opportunity because for a necromancer, dealing with demonic curses is extremely simple. Rood replies without hesitation that curing the patriarch's condition will not be difficult. The answer leaves Eleanor and Leon ecstatic, unable to believe they have finally found a solution to the problem. Road explains that he will still need a few specific items to completely remove the curse from the patriarch's body. Overcome with emotion, Eleanor cries tears of joy upon learning that her grandfather's health can finally be restored. Leon gives Road a mystical communication artifact and assures him that the family will provide anything he asks for. The guard also offers his assistance, saying that he will come pick Road up as soon as he is ready. Road calmly accepts the artifact and agrees to the Ashblade family's proposal. As he leaves the tome, he concludes that the trip was well worth it, even though Bladeseat has recovered only 1% of his power. With his help, Road knows it will only be a matter of time before his servant returns to his peak. Near the exit, he hears Sif calling his name. His sister runs up to Road and curiously asks which heroic spirit blessed him and what class his blessing belongs to. Only then does Road remember that small detail. After all, he cannot simply explain that Bladeseat is worth far more than any blessing. Leo also approaches and seriously comments that he cannot sense any blessing aura coming from his brother. Disappointed, he demands an explanation, reminding Road how much the family spent to secure that spot. Leo admits that he believed Road had truly changed, but now feels that his brother is still the same disappointment as before. Road does not pay much attention to the scolding and simply plays dumb, since heroic blessings would be useless to a necromancer. Discouraged, Sif asks everyone to return home, hoping their mother will not lose her temper when she finds out. That night, a furious shout echoes through the halls of the Morris family castle. Lady Dell slams the table and angrily declares that Road is still a hopeless case. She demands an explanation for the money invested in his spot, while Road chooses to simply listen in silence. Della then tells him that he will be sent to the Magic Academy in a few days, saying it would be better for him to leave home before embarrassing the family even further. The woman also orders Road not to return unless necessary and leaves the hall angrily, claiming that she has even lost her appetite. Before leaving, Della reminds him that Claire from the Flora family will also be studying there and tells Road to get close to her. For him, however, the academy will be a perfect opportunity to strengthen Bladeseat. Road remembers that Claire was his childhood friend and also his fiancée through an agreement between their families, but she eventually died after breaking off the engagement in his previous life. He knows that the girl is not easy to deal with and understands that his mother basically wants to use him as a doormat to preserve the alliance between their families. Even so, Rode intends to protect her, if only to repay the kindness of Claire's mother, one of the few people who treated him well in the past. 3 days later, Rode arrives at the Seven Cities Magic Academy, located in the northern region. Founded by the 7 autonomous cities, the academy accepts students from the most influential noble families. For Rode, leaving home turns out to be a good thing, since he now has much more freedom to develop his necromancer powers. In the courtyard, the arrival of Claire, the young heiress of the Flora family, quickly draws the attention of the other students. The nobles are captivated by the girl's beauty, regretting only that she is already in an arranged engagement. Standing farther away, Rode watches everything unfold with his usual calmness. Claire's butler notices the youngest son of the Morris family and informs his young lady, who immediately looks at Rode with contempt. The man reminds her that bringing them closer together is an order from the family and mentions Leo's potential, convincing Claire to accept the boy's presence. Despite her reluctance, she tells Rode to follow her, thinking that perhaps he can at least help her avoid some trouble. Seeing that attitude, Rode concludes that Claire is still just as spoiled and arrogant as he remembers. But then a familiar voice calls out to him in the middle of the courtyard. It is Eleanor, who is surprised to find Rode at the academy and asks whether someone of his level really intends to study there. Excited by her own theory, she quickly imagines that Rode must be on some secret mission to investigate nobles involved with demons. Rode discreetly asks her to stop calling him master in public, and Eleanor agrees somewhat awkwardly. When the girl asks how she should address him, Rode tells her to simply use his name and takes the opportunity to ask about her grandfather's condition. Eleanor says that nearly all the requested materials have been gathered, and Rode asks her to contact him as soon as everything is ready. At that moment, Claire turns around irritably and shouts, asking what Rode is waiting for before following her. To avoid an unnecessary argument, he forces a smile and walks over to her. Eleanor watches from a distance, clearly annoyed by the way that girl is treating her master. Claire complains that Rode is far too weak to protect her, while the students find it strange to see him walking beside the Flora heiress. Soon, rumors begin spreading about the arrival of Anderson, the son of Lord Rune, who is known for hating any man who gets close to Claire. Anderson appears shortly afterward, walking toward the girl with an arrogant smile. Trying to show off, he complains that Claire did not tell him about her arrival, since he would have gladly escorted her. Rode immediately recognizes Anderson Rune. In his previous life, the boy loved showing off in front of women and bullying anyone he considered weaker. Claire, on the other hand, is clearly unhappy to see him and tells Anderson to leave her alone. Ignoring the rejection, he moves even closer and asks her not to be so cold. Claire's patience ends there and she tells the young man to get lost. The girl backs away in disgust and orders Anderson to keep his distance, regardless of who his father is. Enraged by the rejection, Anderson's eyes glow red as he calls Claire ungrateful. He then reaches out and tries to grab her arm by force. Before he can touch her, Rode intervenes and slaps Anderson's hand away. Without showing any concern, he places himself between the two. Holding his aching wrist, Anderson glares furiously at Rode and asks who he thinks he is. One of his lackeys approaches and discreetly reveals the boy's identity. After learning that he is facing the famous useless son of the Morris family, Anderson gives a malicious smile and asks who gave Rode permission to interfere. Rode responds by squeezing his wrist so hard that Anderson can barely move. With a cold look, he simply tells the noble to leave. The students around them begin growing nervous, remembering that Anderson is extremely vindictive and once nearly drowned a student over something far less serious. Rode refuses to back down and reminds him that Claire already asked Anderson to stay away, so the least he can do is obey. Watching everything from nearby, Claire is confused and cannot understand why Rode is risking so much for her. Irritated by the situation, Anderson finally yanks his arm away to escape the embarrassment. His magical aura erupts as he demands to know who Rode thinks he is to ruin his fun. But when he looks into Rhode's eyes glowing with blue mana, Anderson freezes in fear. His lackeys quickly intervene, reminding him that this is not the place for a fight and that the Flora family is watching. Realizing how much attention they are drawing, Anderson withdraws his aura and tries to save face by saying that Rode simply got lucky. He walks away with his lackeys, but still feels a chill as he tries to understand how someone known as useless managed to frighten him like that. With Anderson gone, the atmosphere in the courtyard finally begins returning to normal. Claire immediately turns toward Rode and complains that even her own family does not want to create trouble with someone like Lord Rune. Rode asks whether she did not want Anderson gone, but Claire tells him to worry about himself, because that man certainly will not let this go. At that moment, a blonde girl wearing the academy uniform comes running over and calls out to Claire. Claire immediately recognizes her friend and greets her by the name Anna. Curious, Anna asks who the young man beside her is, and Claire introduces Rode as the youngest son of the Morris family. Anna immediately recognizes his reputation for being useless, but Claire tells her to keep her voice down so she does not make the situation even more awkward. Claire explains that her mother asked her to look after Rode, and Anna jokes that her friend has basically gained an assistant. Looking at Anna, Rode remembers that in his previous life, she influenced Claire until she practically turned her into a political puppet. Because of this, he decides to keep an eye on her. Once inside the classroom, Rode finds the theories presented by the professors practically useless to him, but remembers something far more interesting: the Tear of the Dead kept inside the Academy's vault. This mystical crystal can strengthen Bladeseek considerably, so Rode intends to steal it as soon as an opportunity appears. Sometime later, the professor ends the lesson, and the students begin putting away their materials. Anna stretches happy to finally be free, and suggests that they do something fun. She invites Claire to go out, but her friend reminds her that they still need to study hard if they want to become great mages. Anna insists, praising Claire's talent and saying that taking a short break will not hurt anyone. Anderson suddenly appears and agrees with her, inviting the two girls to a celebration. Trying to impress them, he says that he reserved a banquet at the Crystal Tavern to celebrate the first day of class. Anna becomes excited when she hears the name of the place, and Anderson says that money is not a problem as long as everyone shows up. The girl begins pressuring Claire to accept, praising the young noble's generosity. At the same time, she takes a subtle jab at Rode, commenting that Anderson knows how to behave like a true noble. After so much insistence, Claire finally gives in and agrees to attend the banquet. The girls celebrate and leave the classroom while Rode silently follows behind them. Along the way, he receives a message through the communication artifact informing him that the materials requested from the Ashblade family are ready. Rode replies by asking them to pick him up directly from the Crystal Tavern. Later, evening approaches as the sun begins disappearing over the academy courtyard. Noticing Rode following the group, Eda becomes irritated and asks who gave him permission to come with them. Rode ignores the complaint. In his previous life, Claire disappeared for several days right after that very party. And since she returned completely traumatized, Rode intends to keep a close watch on everything this time. Claire also asks him to stop following her now that classes are over, while Anna grows even more annoyed at being completely ignored. Anderson pretends to be friendly and says that he sees no problem with Rode joining the celebration. Deep down, however, he is still furious about the earlier humiliation and intends to teach the boy a serious lesson. Anna falls for the act and begins praising Anderson, calling him an extremely understanding young master. She even quietly tells Claire that Rode can come along while wondering whether he might be obsessed with her friend. Shortly afterward, the group arrives at the famous Crystal Tavern as the sun disappears over the horizon. As soon as he enters, Anderson begins flaunting his money and slams the counter to get everyone's attention. He then raises his glass before the crowded tavern and announces that he will pay for the entire banquet, causing the students to cheer. Near the entrance, Rhodes surveys the area and quickly notices several mercenaries drinking and eating throughout the hall. The blood-stained swords lying on some of the tables make it clear that those men are not there merely for decoration. They are real mercenaries, accustomed to dealing with death during their missions. Rhodes immediately realizes that this is a dangerous place for Claire and begins connecting it to what happened to her in his previous life. Not wanting to take any chances, he grabs the girl's arm and asks her to return home before it gets too late. Anna immediately intervenes and slaps Rhodes' hand away to make him release Claire. Irritated, she accuses the boy of ruining the celebration before it has even begun. Claire feels awkward about the argument and explains that she cannot simply break the promise she made to her friend. Anderson also approaches and tells Rhodes to stop being annoying, demanding that he respect Claire's decision. But the entire argument begins attracting the attention of a group of mercenaries nearby. One of them, a muscular man holding a mug of beer, stands up and begins mocking the young nobles celebrating there. Shortly afterward, he walks directly toward the group. After noticing Claire, the mercenary makes a vulgar comment about her appearance. Anderson immediately tries to assert his authority and demands to know why the manager is allowing those men inside the tavern. The mercenary turns around angrily and asks what the boy just said. Trying to avoid trouble, the manager asked Anderson to return the next day when he could reserve the entire establishment exclusively for him. One of his lackeys protests, saying that accepting this would embarrass Anderson in front of Claire. Terrified, the manager tries to restrain the young man and discreetly warns him that those men are ruthless killers when they are outside the city. Anderson, however, refuses to back down and demands to know whether they have never heard of Lord Rune's son. One of the mercenaries slams the table and tells the boy to shut up and leave before things get worse. Blinded by pride, one of Anderson's lackeys charges forward to punch him while shouting the Rune family's name. A loud crash echoes through the tavern in the next instant. The mercenary blocks the punch effortlessly and knocks the lackey down with a single kick. Anderson freezes when he sees his ally fall so easily before him. The man even pours beer over the unconscious young man and mocks the arrogance of those young nobles. According to him, if they were in the middle of the forest, the boy would already be dead for trying to fight a mercenary. Rhodes watches the commotion from a distance without interfering, finding the situation increasingly interesting. Finally understanding the danger, Anderson backs down and asks to speak directly with the group's captain. The mercenary laughs at the attempt and replies that someone like him is not even worthy of speaking with Captain Ken of the Bloodstained Mercenaries. At the back of the hall sits Kent, calmly seated with a large sword on his back and a threatening aura around him. Anderson begins sweating nervously after recognizing the group, famous for accepting even contracts to kill nobles. Kent looks in his direction and mocks Lord Rune's son, saying that his life is worth almost nothing to them. The other students panic when they realize how serious the situation they have gotten themselves into really is. The girls also realize that they provoked exactly the wrong people. Meanwhile, the mercenaries burst into laughter at the sight of the nobles trembling just from hearing their group's name. Even though he is frightened, Anderson thinks that he cannot humiliate himself there, especially in front of Claire. Trying to resolve the situation, he apologizes for the disturbance and suggests that everyone forget what happened out of respect for House Rune. Ken appears to agree, saying that the Rune family has some influence and that he can grant them that favor. The young nobles breathe a sigh of relief, believing Anderson really managed to save them. But the captain imposes one condition: the two girls will have to dance for the mercenaries and drink with them. To make matters worse, Kent looks directly at Anderson and demands that he personally invite the girls. The mercenaries celebrate the idea, eager to see two young noblemen placed in such a situation. Claire is outraged by the demand while Rode continues watching everything with remarkable calmness. Anderson still tries to argue, reminding Kent that Claire is the heiress of the prestigious House Flora. The mercenaries tell him to shut up, making it clear that noble titles will not solve anything there. As the tension rises, some of the students begin begging Claire to accept the demand and avoid angering the group even further. Claire decides to take responsibility and asks Rode to get Anne out of there, trusting that the weight of the Flora name will be enough to protect her. Rode places a hand on her shoulder and calmly says that there is no need to go that far. He then steps forward and demands that Captain Kent end the matter right there. Kent looks at Rode mockingly and asks who the boy thinks he is to give him orders. One of the noblewomen begins complaining, saying that Rode is putting everyone's lives at risk when they could simply accept the condition. At that moment, a huge mercenary stands up, irritated by the sight of a boy ruining the group's fun. It is Rum, the vice captain, who tells his companions that he is going to beat Rode up before they continue the party. Rum charges directly at him. Claire panics when she sees the brute rushing forward and shouts Rude's name. Even in the face of that threat, Rode remains calm and simply watches his opponent. Irritated that he cannot see any fear in the boy, Rum prepares his attack. He uses the flame blade slash skill and unleashes a powerful flaming strike. Claire shouts Rhodes' name, afraid that he will be hit. The nobles also panic, blaming the boy for challenging the mercenaries and putting everyone in danger. Amid the dust kicked up by the attack, a loud metallic sound echoes through the hall. The mercenaries are surprised to realize that Rhodes managed to avoid Rum's attack, despite him being a sword magic practitioner. Rhodes calmly appears beside another mercenary and simply asks to borrow his sword. Furious at being ignored, Rum charges again, determined to finish the boy off. With the steel sword in hand, Rhodes tells Blade Seat that they finally have a real blade. The entity covered in blue flames appears behind him, while Rum approaches with another flaming attack. Rhodes responds by unleashing a spectral slash infused with his blue energy. The two blades collide violently, sending sparks throughout the hall. The vice captain's expression changes immediately. The tip of Rum's sword breaks during the clash and falls to the floor. The mercenary stares at what remains of his weapon, unable to believe that a boy just broke it. The humiliation in front of his captain and companions pushes his anger to the limit. Rum leaps at Rhodes again, shouting that a true mercenary proves his worth in hand-to-hand combat. He starts throwing punches and tries to grab Rhodes, determined to defeat him using physical strength. While dodging the attacks, Rhodes acknowledges that when it comes to raw strength, directly confronting that man is still not a good idea. Rum completely loses his temper and continues charging forward, consumed by rage. Trying to prevent any escape, the giant spreads his arms and attempts to corner Rhodes. But Rhodes activates Roaring Inferno, causing a dark entity to appear behind him. The energy explodes and sends the massive mercenary flying through the air. Rum is launched across the hall and violently crashes into the structure of the building. The impact leaves him unconscious on the floor, coughing up blood and completely defeated. Anderson is left speechless after watching the supposedly useless son of the Moors family defeat the group's right-hand man. With Rum down, the other members of the bloodstained mercenaries gather around Kent. The captain steps forward and threatens to dismember Rhodes and throw his flesh to the animals if he keeps resisting. The nobles panic again and blame Rhodes for making the mercenaries even angrier. Some of them suggest to Anderson that they use the distraction created by the boy to escape. Anne also pulls Claire away, insisting that they need to leave instead of trying to help someone who decided to fight the entire group. Once Rhodes sees Claire finally moving toward a safer place, he concludes that he can now deal with the situation much more freely. Kent continues taunting him and promises to torture him all night before demanding a massive ransom from House Morris. Rhodes shows no concern. If there is no other option, he intends to kill everyone there, and Kent could still become a rather useful undead. Before the confrontation can continue, an imposing voice comes from the entrance, asking how much Captain Kent's own life is worth. Irritated by the interruption, Kent turns around and demands to know which idiot has decided to die with him. A silver-haired knight wearing a grey cloak calmly enters the hall. As soon as Kent recognizes the newcomer, he turns pale. It is Lord Leon. Completely ignoring the mercenaries, Leon walks straight over to Rhodes and respectfully asks whether those men tried to hurt him. He quickly realizes how ridiculous his own question sounds and comments that those clowns could never touch Rhodes, considering even he himself did not last long against the boy. Kent panics when he sees such a powerful noble treating Rhodes with so much respect. Leon then points at the captain and demands to know who gave them permission to lay a hand on an honored guest of House Ashblade. Kent immediately understands the severity of the situation. The Ashblade family rules the north, and a mistake like this could result in the destruction of his entire group. Terrified, the captain drops to his knees before Rhodes and begs him to spare the lives of his men. The other mercenaries are shocked to see their own leader humiliating himself before a boy. Kent removes the symbol of authority of the bloodstained mercenaries and hands it to Rhodes as a sign of submission. He swears loyalty and promises that from that moment on, his group will be available to carry out any order Rhodes gives them. Rhodes realizes that Kent is simply using the best possible strategy to save his own skin, but also concludes that an army of living mercenaries may be more useful than a pile of corpses. Out of consideration for Leon, he accepts the symbol and decides to spare the group for now. That does not mean, however, that Kent will escape completely unpunished. Unable to understand what is happening, the captain feels a dark aura begin surrounding his body. A powerful chill runs down his spine as the energy enters his body. Behind him, the curse takes the form of a massive demonic figure. Kent screams in pain as the energy consumes his vitality, serving as a warning for what he just did. With the captain writhing in agony on the floor, Rode calls Leon and leaves the tavern with him. The mercenaries watch the two leave before quickly rushing over to help Kent. Lying on the floor and covered in cold sweat, the captain realizes how lucky he was. If he had provoked Rode any further, perhaps none of them would have made it out alive. Shortly afterward, Rode travels by carriage with Leon, who informs him that Lord Ashblade is already waiting for him. Their destination is the imposing Ashblade family estate, surrounded by a massive structure that looks more like a castle. Upon entering the main chambers, Rode finds the elderly patriarch and Eleanor waiting for his arrival. The girl excitedly runs over to greet him, happy that Rode has finally arrived. She then presents a tray filled with rare ingredients and asks whether they will be enough for the treatment. Eleanor explains that gathering all those materials was quite difficult since they are extremely rare resources. Rode examines the items, channels his mana, and confirms that they are more than enough. He approaches the patriarch, who begins trembling with anxiety as magical energy fills the room. Rode asks everyone to step back and begins manifesting his power to remove the evil lodged inside the old man's body. His eyes glow intensely blue as he focuses on extracting the spiritual parasite. A demonic specter is ripped from the patriarch's body and appears roaring before everyone. Rode immediately extends his hand and grabs the evil spirit with his energy. The creature struggles, but it is completely suppressed by the necromancer's power. Keeping it trapped within his mana claws, Rode warns that there is nowhere for it to escape. The undead writhes as it realizes that it has been completely subdued. Eleanor watches in disbelief, unable to believe that this creature was the spirit responsible for tormenting her grandfather for 10 years. Leon also watches the scene in amazement, remembering the day he had the terrible idea of challenging someone at Rhodes' level. Since the entity is still trying to resist, Rhodes simply increases the pressure on it. Closing his fist, he compresses all that spiritual energy. The dark mass condenses between his hands until it takes the form of a small sphere. Rhodes completes the process by sealing the spirit inside a crystal gem. Look at the stone. He realizes that this is the first death stone he has refined since his regression and already plans to use it to strengthen Bladeseat. Leon becomes ecstatic when he realizes that Rode removed in just a few seconds a curse that had tormented his lord for more than a decade. Eleanor runs over to her grandfather to ask how he is feeling. Rode immediately tells her to step back and keep her distance. In the next instant, the patriarch begins screaming as an enormous amount of magical power erupts from his body. Eleanor is pushed back by the wind generated by the mana and becomes frightened, unable to understand what is happening. Rode explains that the undead acted like a parasite, constantly draining the old man's strength. Now that it has been removed, his power can finally circulate again. Surrounded by an intense aura, the patriarch rises as his spiritual strength returns. He looks at his own hands and realizes that he has not only recovered his power, but also advanced to the peak intermediate archmage stage. The old man bursts into laughter when he realizes that even his age, he still has a chance to reach the advanced archmage level. Leon becomes emotional at the thought that the Ashblade family's fortunes have finally begun to change after so many years of pressure from other clans. Looking at Rode, he realizes that this boy has just saved the future of their entire family. Still surprised, Eleanor asks how her grandfather managed to advance in level immediately after being cured. Rode explains that living with the curse for 10 years ended up strengthening and shaping the patriarch's body, allowing him to make that breakthrough as soon as the problem was removed. Eleanor becomes even more surprised when she realizes that such a terrible curse ultimately brought an unexpectedly positive consequence. Patting his granddaughter on the head, the patriarch confirms that he has regained his strength and is now very close to the next level. His expression then becomes serious, and the old man declares that it is time for House Ashblade to reclaim everything it lost during its years of weakness. As a sign of gratitude, he bows before Rode and promises that his family will follow his orders unconditionally. Rode replies that he does not need any of that because he has already gotten what he wanted. Even so, there is one thing he would like to ask. Willing to repay the favor, the patriarch tells Rode that he may ask anything he wants. Rode wants to know where the old man was cursed because he believes finding that place could finally solve his problem of obtaining more death stones. The patriarch explains that 10 years ago, he fell into a trap set by demons during an imperial crusade in the Valley of Lamentation. Rode knows the reputation of the place. Since the valley is infested with high-level monsters, he decides to wait until he becomes stronger before risking a trip there. Sometime later, he is traveling by carriage again when one of Leon's subordinates gets his attention. The maid informs him that the residence Rode requested is already prepared, right beside the Seven Cities Magic Academy. After stepping out of the carriage, Rode finally sees the place prepared for him. But instead of a simple house, he finds an enormous and luxurious estate that looks like a genuine palace. Rode even feels a little awkward since he only asked for somewhere to sleep, not a mansion of that size. Meanwhile, back at the Ashblade estate, the patriarch's laughter echoes through the castle. Eleanor reminds her grandfather that Rode left quite some time ago and asks why he is still so excited. The old man replies that he is simply too happy and advises his granddaughter to maintain a good relationship with Rode, the most mysterious and powerful young man he has ever met. Hearing this, Eleanor becomes visibly embarrassed and simply agrees. Shortly afterward, the patriarch takes on a serious expression as he thinks about Rustblade, suspecting that he may have been involved in the curse he suffered years ago. Later, the scene shifts to the Flora family estate. Claire arrives home late and finds her mother in the hallway, who immediately asks why she took so long. The woman also wants to know whether Claire met the young man from House Morris and how their interaction went. Feeling somewhat awkward, Claire looks away and confirms that she met Rode during the day. She asks her mother not to judge the boy based on rumors like everyone else does and assures her that she will be able to get along with him. Remembering the moment Rode stood in front of her with a sword, Claire concludes that he is definitely not the useless boy everyone claims he is. That same night, inside his new mansion, Rode prepares to continue his training. Holding the gem he just obtained, he decides that it is time to strengthen Bladeseat. Rode calls his servant by name and summons him. Bladeseat materializes surrounded by blue flames and immediately kneels before his master. Rode knows that the spirit was a legendary magic swordsman and that even while weakened, his swordsmanship remains on an entirely different level. He makes the gem float in front of his servant. With his eyes glowing with energy, Rode orders Bladeseat to accept the gift and recover part of his strength. The Death Stone shatters in midair, releasing an enormous amount of mystical energy. Streams of blue mana begin flowing directly into Bladeseat's body. The spirit absorbs all that essence and his power begins growing rapidly. After a powerful discharge of energy, Bladeseat finally completes his evolution. The servant's advancement also sends part of that strength back into Rode, surrounding his body with blue lightning. Feeling the energy flowing through his veins, he realizes that strengthening Bladeseat has also boosted his own level. With his hands surrounded by mystical flames, Rode confirms that he has advanced to the peak apprentice archmage level. Bladeseat, meanwhile, has reached the peak intermediate archmage level. Even so, Rode knows that he needs to remain discreet and avoid revealing his servant in public. The next morning, students once again fill the academy hallways before classes begin. Anna notices Claire looking around worriedly and asks who she is searching for. Claire mentions that Rode still has not appeared and wonders what happened after the trouble at the tavern. Anna, on the other hand, mocks him by saying that the mercenaries probably already fed him to the animals. Irritated by her friend's lack of sensitivity, Claire reminds her that Rode stayed behind specifically to protect all of them. Anna tries to justify herself, saying that she is only being realistic since they were facing the feared Bloodstain mercenaries. As he walks irritably through the hallways, Anderson complains that Rode stole all the attention while his lackeys try to calm them down. Suddenly, he stops in the middle of the hallway when he sees Rode calmly walking through the academy. Anderson is left speechless, unable to believe that the boy came out completely unharmed after facing those mercenaries. Claire runs over to Rode, relieved to see that he's okay, and he assures her that the group will not bother them again. The nobles around them watch in surprise, unable to understand how Rode escaped without a scratch or exactly what he meant by that. Anna quickly comes up with an explanation, mockingly saying that the Morris family probably spent a fortune to rescue him. Shortly afterward, the sound of heels echoes through the classroom, announcing the arrival of the teacher. It is Instructor Margaret, who informs the students that today's practical magic lesson will take place in the monster forest outside the city. Rode remembers that the region is territory controlled by the Bloodstained mercenaries and decides to stay alert to ensure Claire's safety. Discreetly, he takes out the communication token he received from Kent to contact the captain. Away from the other students, Rode activates the artifact and calls Kent. On the other end, the captain responds immediately, ready to provide any information his new master wants. Rode asks for every available detail about the monster forest, since the mercenaries have a garrison operating in that region. Kent explains that an ancient tomb deep inside the forest recently began reacting, releasing dark mana and making the monsters restless. He adds that the sole survivor of an expedition returned completely insane, talking about skeletons that had risen again. Since then, the inner forest has been declared off limits. According to Kent, only the monsters near the edge remain weak. Even so, he offers to accompany Rode if he intends to enter the area. Rode declines the escort and says that he already has all the information he needs. Thinking about the anomaly, he realizes that the tome may be hiding an opportunity for growth that he never encountered in his previous life. Shortly afterward, several carriages leave the academy, taking the students to the location of the practical lesson. During the journey, the students take the opportunity to admire the scenery around them. Inside one of the carriages, one of Anderson's lackeys asks whether they still plan to go after Rode as they had discussed. Anderson replies that Claire remains his priority, but promises to crush Rode if he gets in the way again. Upon reaching the edge of the monster forest, the students step out and gather in a clearing. Margaret gathers the class and announces that it is time to put their true combat abilities to the test. Their mission is to hunt shadow claw wolves infesting the area, and each student must return with one claw before nightfall. Without warning, a burst of fire shoots through the air and strikes a target among the trees. A powerful explosion follows, causing the students to cheer at Anderson's demonstration. Proudly, he shows off his fire magic while his followers claim that he can collect enough claws for the entire group by himself. Anna is impressed and immediately suggests that Claire join Anderson's group to ensure greater safety. Claire disagrees, admitting that she would feel much safer beside Rode since even the mercenaries could not touch him. Meanwhile, Rode remains silent, focusing his senses to map everything around him. After reaching the peak apprentice archmage level, he realizes that his perception range has increased to 300 meters. Rode detects several wolves nearby and also senses a fluctuation of death energy coming in from deeper inside the forest, confirming what Kent told him about the tome. To ensure Claire's safety during the test, he approaches her and suggests that the two of them form a pair. Claire smiles and immediately agrees. Shortly afterward, Anderson appears showing off the first Shadow Claw wolf he defeated, earning applause from the class. Full of confidence, he claims that monsters of that level pose no challenge to his power. Seeing this, Anna practically drags Claire over to Anderson, insisting that they should join his team. Barely paying attention to her friend's preference, Anna excitedly asks whether the two of them can join the group. Anderson immediately agrees and assures them that he will personally protect them during the hunt. As the students move deeper into the forest, feline creatures surrounded by dark purple auras begin stirring among the trees. One of them leaps aggressively, consumed by the mystical energy affecting the monsters in the region. Deeper inside, enormous beasts with glowing eyes watch the students moving through the shadows. Realizing that something is wrong, Rode watches Margaret walking ahead of the group. The teacher also senses the presence of a monster lord in the area and realizes that Rode noticed the same danger. Worried about the students, Margaret heads deeper into the forest and asks Rode to look after the class while she eliminates the threat. Anderson becomes furious after hearing that and complains that he does not need Rode's protection. Rode, however, realizes that the aura of death is making the monsters increasingly aggressive, far beyond what the students are prepared to handle. Ignoring the danger, Ederson continues showing off and promises to collect all the claws they need while keeping the group safe. Trusting him, the students continue together through the shadows of the forest. After some time, Anderson notices the sudden silence and begins wondering where all the wolves went. At that moment, an enormous shadow claw wolf leaps from the trees toward the group. Trying to show off his power, Anderson launches a fireball directly at the creature. The attack hits directly but causes very little damage to the enraged monster. The wolf charges through the flames almost completely unharmed and continues toward him. The beast leaps with its claws ready to strike Anderson. Terrified, he cannot understand why his magic barely worked against that monster. The massive wolf opens its jaws while its red eyes remain locked on the young man. With no time to react, Anderson covers his face with his arms and braces for the impact. He closes his eyes in fear as the creature's shadow covers his body. Before the claws can reach him, Rode appears in front of Anderson and neutralizes the monster with a single movement. The enormous shadow claw wolf is slammed into the ground and knocked unconscious. Claire and Anna are surprised to see Rode take down with a single strike the creature Anderson could not stop. Anna finally realizes that he did not escape the mercenaries because his family rescued him, but because he truly possesses the strength to defend himself. Sensing the number of monsters scattered throughout the area, Rode concludes that he will have to summon the Earth Ripper. He runs deeper into the forest, leaving Claire worried as she watches him head alone toward the danger. In the middle of the forest, Rode soon finds himself surrounded by several enraged wolves. His eyes glow with energy as he orders his summon to manifest. The ground begins to shake, and the Earth Ripper emerges by tearing through the earth around him. Rode orders it to eliminate every shadow claw wolf contaminated by the black mana. The creature lets out a deafening roar that echoes throughout the forest. It then stomps the ground with tremendous force and releases a shockwave capable of crushing several monsters at once. Feeling the tremor from a distance, Anderson recognizes the Earth Ripper's ability and begins hoping that the creature does not appear anywhere near them. Claire remains worried about Rode, while Anna suggests that he may have already been devoured by the giant monster. Frightened, Anna asks Anderson to protect them, and he agrees while stammering, clearly having no idea what to do. Deeper inside the forest, the Earth Ripper continues eliminating the beasts affected by the dark energy. The enormous creature rises before the few monsters still standing. Rode realizes that these survivors were not contaminated by the black mana and orders his servant to spare them. The Earth Ripper obeys and backs away, allowing the normal animals to flee in fear. At that moment, the sound of rustling bushes among the trees catches Rode's attention. In another part of the forest, Anna also hears the noise and panics, imagining that the giant creature is approaching. When she realizes that there are only a few Shadow Claw wolves, she actually breathes a sigh of relief. Anderson takes the opportunity to regain his confidence and promises that he will deal with the wolves, just as he guaranteed earlier. Meanwhile, Margaret gathers a massive amount of mana into her staff while facing the monster lord. With her gaze focused behind her glasses, she prepares her most powerful attack. The teacher casts Heavenly Fire, launching a massive pillar of flames directly onto the creature. The explosion reduces the monster lord to ashes, and Margaret believes she has eliminated the threat. However, when she examines the remains, she notices traces of black mana and realizes that something far more serious is happening deeper inside the forest. A chill runs down her spine as a dark presence begins approaching. The heavy sound of hooves echoes among the trees as a mysterious figure advances. With blue flames surrounding its mount, the creature reveals itself as the true source of that dark mana. It is a headless undead knight riding a spectral horse and fully armed. Margaret realizes that this creature, resurrected from the tome, is responsible for driving the monsters of the forest insane. After sensing its aura, she estimates that the undead knight is at the intermediate archmage level. Since Margaret is only a mid-level novice archmage, she understands that if the monster gets past her, the students will have no chance of surviving. With no other option, she decides to put everything into a single attack, gathering all the mana she has left. Margaret casts the forbidden spell Heavenly Fire Meteor. A massive pillar of flame shoots into the sky, creating a blazing formation above the forest. A gigantic flaming meteor crashes directly toward the undead knight. The impact causes a massive explosion and covers the area in an intense wave of heat. Exhausted after using almost all of her mana, Margaret smiles in relief, believing that she has finally destroyed the creature. But then a blade covered in blue flames cuts through the fire and strikes the teacher. The knight emerges completely unharmed and attacks Margaret, sending her flying away with severe injuries. In another part of the forest, Rode extends his hand to dismiss the Earth Ripper after its work is finished. Before doing so, however, he senses an extremely powerful fluctuation of energy in the air. Rode looks deeper into the forest and realizes that the true threat from the tome is heading in his direction. The undead knight appears among the trees, advancing on its mount surrounded by blue flames. Rode remains calm. As the monarch of the undead, he believes that a creature like this should be kneeling before him. The knight attacks with its spear, but the collision with Rode's power causes a loud metallic crash. The creature releases even more black mana, trying to crush him through sheer force. The two energies collide again, scattering blue and purple sparks around them. The impact creates an explosion of mana powerful enough to strike even the nearby trees. Rode watches the intensity of that dark energy without showing any fear. In the distance, a massive spiral pillar of black energy rises into the sky, drawing the students' attention. Claire and Anna stare at the darkness on the horizon in complete fear. Anderson realizes that the phenomenon appeared in the direction Rode went and mockingly says that he is probably already dead. The same pillar illuminates the devastated area where Margaret remains lying on the ground. Injured and bleeding, the teacher watches the enormous manifestation of energy in the sky. Even with almost no strength left, she tries to get back up and reach her students before it is too late. At the center of the confrontation, Rode remains firm before the undead knight. Analyzing his enemy, he realizes that the dark mana has consumed almost all of its sanity, leaving only the instinct to hunt strong beings, devour them, and increase its own power. Rode realizes that the creature sees him as prey and decides to finally put an end to its suffering. Sensing the threat, the knight raises its spear as blue flames cover its body. Driven by instinct, it recognizes Rode as a powerful king that must be eliminated. Refusing to submit, the monster activates Knight's charge and rushes directly toward him. Rode watches the charge without moving, remaining completely calm. Even so, he knows that at his current level, taking that attack head-on would be risky. Because of this, he decides to use a necromancy technique called Echo of Memories to turn the confrontation in his favor. Releasing his dark energy, Rode tells his enemy to enjoy what it is about to experience. In an instant, the knight's mind becomes trapped inside an illusion created from its own memories. The undead finds itself once again on an ancient battlefield, staring at its own blood-covered hands. As it witnesses the war and massacre around it, its trauma begins to return. Disoriented by its own memories, the knight lets out a scream inside the illusion. A gigantic image of Rode appears over the battlefield and declares that this nightmare will become the grave prepared for it. Watching his enemy's condition, Rode realizes that its strength is comparable to Bladeseat's and decides to use this opportunity to test his servant. This will be Bladeseat's first chance to fight using 100% of the power he currently possesses. The summoned warrior accepts the order and promises to defeat the enemy in his master's name. With the little sanity it had left destroyed by Echo of Memories, the knight turns into a killing machine that thinks only about attacking. Bladeseat calmly advances, wielding his massive sword while concentrating aura into the blade. The knight charges at him with a ferocious attack, driven only by the desire to kill. Bladeseat reacts immediately and intercepts the strike with a precise movement. The two weapons collide with enough force to shake the ground and raise a cloud of dust. The two begin rapidly exchanging blows, sending sparks of energy flying with every clash. The pressure of the confrontation is so intense that the ground beneath them begins to crack. Without allowing his enemy to regain its rhythm, Bladeseat changes the angle of his sword and delivers a heavy downward strike. The undead knight manages to block at the last moment, producing a loud metallic sound. Bladeseat immediately raises his weapon again and continues putting pressure on his opponent's defense. He then precisely avoids the counterattack, demonstrating complete control over his movements. Even in its madness, the knight recognizes that it is facing an extremely skilled opponent. Consumed by rage, it roars and concentrates all of its remaining black mana into one final attack. The undead throws its weapon at Bladeseat with maximum force, trying to pierce straight through him. Bladeseat stands firm and responds with a powerful cutting wave that splits the energy of the attack. His technique completely neutralizes the charge and disperses the aura concentrated by the enemy. Without wasting any time, the servant immediately takes position to finish the fight. He activates Pale Blade Veil, surrounding his sword with a glowing vortex of energy. The technique explodes across the battlefield and creates a shockwave that covers the entire area. As the smoke begins to clear, the undead knight looks around, unable to understand where its opponent went. Still disoriented by the impact, it realizes that Bladeseat has completely disappeared from sight. At that moment, Bladeseat reappears behind it with his sword already prepared for the final strike. The knight senses his presence but no longer has time to react. Bladeseat uses Serene Soul Piercing and drives his massive blade through the undead knight's back. A pillar of blue aura erupts from within the enemy and destroys its magical structure from the inside out. As the creature begins disappearing, Bladeseed declares that his master has just granted it a true and final death. The knight's armor completely falls apart and crashes onto the ground amid the dust. The last particles of dark mana vanish into the air, leaving the devastated area in silence. Bladeseed kneels before Road and reports that the enemy has been defeated. Road calmly approaches and praises his servant's work. Looking across the battlefield, he notices a small fragment of the knight's soul still flickering in the air. Feeling some compassion for the warrior, Road purifies the remaining fragment with his magic and allows its soul to finally rest. Meanwhile, Margaret runs through the forest, following the trail of destruction left behind by the battle. Worried about the students, she forces her injured body to keep moving, determined to stop the undead knight from reaching them. When Margaret finally reaches the clearing, she stops in complete surprise at what she finds. The entire area has been devastated, and standing at the center of the destruction is Rude Morris. The teacher can barely believe that her young student is standing there completely unharmed. Since the undead knight's aura disappeared in that exact location, Margaret begins to suspect that Road was responsible for defeating it. Road casually turns toward her and says that he's relieved to see that the teacher is also safe. Still suspicious, Margaret directly asks whether he encountered a headless undead knight be animated by black mana. Road calmly replies that he did not see any creature like that. To complete his explanation, he says that the clearing was already destroyed when he arrived while following the trail of the wolves. Margaret remains suspicious because she did not sense any other powerful presence nearby and begins considering the possibility that Road is hiding his true strength. Not wanting to pressure him at that moment, she accepts his answer and thanks the boy on behalf of the other students. Road takes the opportunity to change the subject and comments that returning with her clothes in that condition will only make the students worry. Margaret looks at her own torn dress and becomes slightly embarrassed, admitting that he is right. She channels her fire magic and surrounds her body in a golden glow, restoring her clothes and appearance. After returning to normal, Margaret turns around with a smile to continue the conversation. But Road used those few seconds to disappear, leaving the teacher talking to herself. Meanwhile, he travels through a dark region of the forest, following the traces of black mana toward the tomb Kent mentioned. The farther he goes, the denser and heavier the dark energy becomes. Road finally finds the entrance to a cave and realizes that this is exactly where the undead knight returned to life. Inside the darkness, a vortex of purple energy pulses while releasing a sinister presence. Without hesitation, Road walks directly through the barrier of dark magic. A slight smile appears on his face when he finally finds what he was looking for. Engraved into the floor of the ruins is an enormous and complex magic circle, exactly as he expected. Suddenly, tentacles formed from dark energy emerge from the formation and move to protect it. Road does not even flinch and orders that mediocre magic to get out of his way. With a single release of mana, he destroys the tentacles into countless fragments. Examining the ground, Road finds artificial magic stones filled with black mana and realizes how the ritual managed to reanimate the ancient knight. He concludes that this formation caused the entire anomaly in the monster forest, meaning that someone is operating from the shadows. Picking up one of the stones, Road looks down on the method being used, considering it such a poor imitation of necromancy that is practically an insult to the undead. Even so, he keeps the black mana stones, knowing that they may prove useful later. Back at the meeting point, Margaret breathes a sigh of relief when she sees that all the students are safe and realizes that the undead knight never reached them. The teacher asks whether everyone completed the assignment and announces that they will return to the academy as soon as the remaining students arrive. Claire approaches worriedly and tells Margaret that Road still has not returned, also mentioned the massive mana vortex that appeared shortly after he entered the forest. Margaret asks whether that phenomenon really appeared right after Road left the group. After receiving confirmation, the teacher becomes even more convinced that Road was the one who defeated the undead knight. Meanwhile, Anderson takes advantage of the boy's absence to mock him, telling the other students that Road must have gotten scared by the vortex and run away. Margaret interrupts the comments and assures them that Road will return, making it clear that nobody is leaving without him. Even so, Anderson's lackeys continue whispering that the boy has probably become wolf food by now. Curious, some students ask Margaret what that strange mana vortex was and why the monsters were acting so aggressively. To avoid causing panic, she replies that it was merely a normal mana eruption and assures them that the forest is already safe. Hearing this, Anderson becomes even more convinced that Road ran away out of fear and believes that he himself could have handled the problem. But Road calmly appears among the trees shortly afterward, and Anderson immediately begins mocking the supposed deserter. Claire runs over to him in relief and asks whether anything happened. Road replies that was nothing serious. He walks straight past Anderson without reacting to the taunts, making the noble even more irritated at being ignored. Margaret approaches Road, still curious about what really happened deeper inside the forest. He shows her the claw he obtained during the hunt and says that his assignment is complete, so everyone can return to the academy now. Since all the dark matter has disappeared from the forest, Margaret becomes increasingly convinced that Road destroyed the source of the anomaly. Even so, she simply smiles to herself, remembering that regardless of how strong the boy may be, she is still his teacher and should protect him. Margaret then officially announces the end of the practical lesson, causing the class to celebrate. The students board the carriages and begin the journey back to the academy. Sometime later, a hooded figure appears inside the cave where the magic circle once stood. The stranger walks toward the ritual site and silently examines the completely destroyed formation. Touching the shattered stones, the figure angrily realizes that someone discovered and dismantled the magic circle. The figure concludes that the same person must also have defeated the ancient knight and suspects that an imperial grandmaster may have passed through the region. Furious, the stranger promises that anyone who tries to interfere with their plans will pay with their life. The next day, sunlight once again shines across the academy grounds. Walking through the hallways, Rode thinks about how much Margaret may have realized during the incident and decides to use the opportunity to ask about the tier of the dead. Before finding her, however, he notices a large crowd of students gathered near the main hallway. At the center of everyone's attention is Kaya, a young noble from a military family. Several girls watch the young man in admiration, praising his demeanor and saying that he is different from the academy's shallow nobles. Anderson watches from a distance, consumed by envy, complaining that Kaya only gets so much attention because his older brother is a high-ranking archmage in the army. Hearing this, Rode glances sideways and sarcastically asks whether Anderson really hates Kaya that much. Anderson furiously replies that he should be the center of attention and calls Kaya his greatest rival at the academy before, saying that Rode is not even worthy of being compared to them. Rode simply watches in silence. In his previous life, he truly envied and hated Kaya, but now he no longer feels the same way. At that moment, firm footsteps echo through the hallway as Kaya walks directly toward the two of them. With a calm expression, he politely asks Anderson and his friends to clear the way. Arrogant as always, Anderson refuses and says that Kaya should be the one to move aside. Kaya's expression changes slightly as he gives his rival a cold stare. The surrounding students begin growing nervous, knowing that a fight between heirs of two influential families could cause a massive problem. Before anything can happen, Margaret appears and scolds the two for blocking the hallway, suggesting that they save all that energy for the physical combat class. Kaya apologizes for the disturbance and says that he is already leaving with his companions. As his rival walks away, Anderson shouts that he will settle things with him during training. After the students disperse, Rode takes the opportunity to approach Margaret. Inside her office, the teacher sits down and asks what he really needs. Rode gets straight to the point and asks whether he can be excused from that afternoon's practical combat class. Margaret smiles and asks whether he wants to avoid trouble or simply does not want to reveal his true strength to his classmates. Rode remains silent in her accurate observation. Amused by his reaction, Margaret realizes that he did not come there just to ask for permission to skip class, and Rode confirms that she is right. He then asks whether the teacher knows about an item called the Tier of the Dead. Margaret explains that it is an ancient and extremely powerful artifact, but since none of the instructors have been able to understand its true purpose, it remains stored in the Academy vault. Surprised by the question, she asks whether Rode is specifically interested in that artifact. He confirms without hesitation that it is exactly what he wants. Margaret explains that she does not have enough authority to remove such a valuable item from the vault. Rode becomes thoughtful, but she adds that she might be able to make an exception if he accepts one condition. Margaret promises to introduce him to a former professor with enough authority, as long as Rode participates in the combat class and reveals his true strength. Rode realizes that the teacher's proposal has completely cornered him. Since he needs the artifact, he sees no other option and agrees to participate in the training. Later, the students begin gathering inside the academy gymnasium for the practical class. In one corner of the arena, Eleanor stretches while waiting for the training to begin. The boys nearby watch the young woman in admiration, commenting that she belongs to a mysterious and extremely respected family. When they notice Kaya walking toward her, they begin commenting that the young noble seems to like the girl quite a lot. Kaya approaches with a smile and asks how Eleanor's grandfather is doing. She thanks him for his concern and politely replies that the patriarch is doing very well. But when she looks over Kaya's shoulder, Eleanor recognizes Rode at the back of the arena. Excited, she immediately shifts her attention away from Kaya and begins calling out to her master. Realizing what is about to happen, Rode raises a finger to his lips and discreetly signals for her to stay quiet. Eleanor immediately understands and covers her mouth, embarrassed that she nearly revealed the relationship between them. Kaya is surprised to realize that the girl he likes completely ignored him because of another boy. Annoyed, he gives Rode a dark look. Before the situation can develop any further, a loud crash echoes through the arena and draws everyone's attention. Anderson enters furiously and shouts that Kaya will pay for what happened that morning. Already irritated because of Rode, Kaya cracks his knuckles and accepts the provocation, saying that he's not having a good day either. Meanwhile, one of Anderson's lackeys approaches Rode in the stands and calls him Shorty. The young man tells Rode to stand up, saying that it is time for him to get beaten for interfering earlier. The class begins growing excited as they realize that Anderson and Kaya are about to fight. The combat instructor steps into the center of the ring and says that he does not care what caused the argument between them. He only reinforces one important rule: the use of magic magic is strictly forbidden during these physical duels. Confident in his abilities, Anderson asks for permission to challenge Kaya and claims that he is just as skilled in hand-to-hand combat as he is with magic. The instructor asks whether Kaya accepts, and the young man immediately agrees. The two stare at each other from the center of the ring, ready to settle their rivalry through physical combat. Anderson taunts Kaya from across the arena, saying that he wants to see whether his rival will remain so confident after hitting the ground. Among the spectators, Anna makes some room beside Claire so she can get a better view of the duel. Claire points out that her friend seemed quite confident in Anderson's abilities, but Anna comments that Kaya received military training directly from his older brother. Anderson wastes no time and charges aggressively, saying that he has waited a long time for a chance to hit Kaya. His opponent remains calm and takes a firm stance while waiting for him to approach. Anderson throws a powerful punch, but Kaya easily dodges it. Taking advantage of the opening left by the attack, Kaya lands a direct counterattack into his rival's stomach. The impact sends Anderson crashing onto the arena floor with a loud thud. The female students in the stands cheer at Kaya's display of strength. Anna is also impressed and tells Claire that Kaya is handsome, strong, and comes from an excellent family, practically making him a Prince Charming. Looking down at Anderson, Kaya tells him to give up, making it clear that the two of them are not on the same level. He also demands an apology for Anderson's earlier rudeness in exchange for ending the situation. Humiliated, Anderson spits on the floor and gets back up, consumed by rage and refusing to accept defeat. Without thinking clearly, he charges again, trying to hit Kaya by any means necessary. Kaya watches the reckless attack and warns that Anderson himself chose to continue. With a single strike, he hits his rival and knocks him to the ground for the second time. The students are surprised by how easily Kaya won the confrontation. From the gymnasium entrance, Margaret carefully watches the conclusion of the fight. Meanwhile, Anderson's lackey turns his attention back to Rode in the stands and threatens to make him end up on his knees the same way. Rode silently watches him approach and concludes that even in his second life, he still keeps running into arrogant people everywhere. The lackey charges at Rode with a punch, saying that he means to learn never to get in their way again. Rode easily dodges and thinks that although he mainly fought using his massive undead army in his previous life, that does not mean he cannot defend himself. To deal with someone at that level, he realizes that he does not even need to rely on Bladeseat's experience. With a single movement, Rode lands a precise strike and leaves his attacker with no chance to react. Kaya turns around in surprise when he hears something being violently launched across the arena. Anderson's lackey flies through the air and crashes hard onto the wooden floor. When the dust settles, he is lying completely unconscious on the ground, leaving the entire gymnasium silent. Kaya watches in surprise, unable to understand how an apparently ordinary boy defeated that guy in an instant. Margaret's eyes also widen when she sees how easily Rode handled the situation. Anna and Claire are left speechless when they realize that Rode himself delivered that blow. After the attack, he simply returns to his stance as calmly as ever. Internally, however, Rode realizes that he tried to hold back but did not expect his opponent to be so fragile. Kaya looks at the unconscious young man on the floor, who can barely move and is even foaming at the mouth. He then walks over to Rode and directly asks whether he really is Rode Morris. With a serious look, Kaya questions whether he really needed to go that far during a simple training session. Rode coldly replies that he held back and assures him that the young man will be fine. He then points toward Anderson, who is also lying on the ground after the previous duel, and reminds Kaya that he is not exactly in a position to criticize someone for going too far. The response hits the noble's pride, causing his expression to change immediately. Anna grows nervous and tells Claire that Rode just provoked the most dangerous student in the class. The surrounding students also become restless, unable to believe that someone known as the useless son of House Morris has decided to confront the military heir. Eleanor partially covers her face, worried not about Rode, but about the possibility of her master seriously injuring Kaya. Margaret, on the other hand, watches everything with a slight smile, interested in finally seeing just how strong the boy really is. Kaya assumes a secret combat stance and concentrates an enormous amount of physical strength throughout his body. The students recognize his family's technique, which can generate destructive power comparable to magic without consuming mana. Kaya shoots forward and activates his special move, Crushing Iron Fist. The movement is so fast that several students can barely follow him, even though they know he is using nothing but physical strength. Seeing Rode still standing motionless, Kaya assumes that he does not understand the danger and shouts for him to dodge. His fist comes down with tremendous pressure directly toward Rode's face. To everyone's surprise, Rode catches the strike with one hand without even moving from his spot. Kaya freezes, unable to understand how someone managed to stop a punch powerful enough to crush rocks. Rode twists his wrist and easily pushes him backward, forcing the noble to retreat. Irritated that his attack was blocked, Kaya refuses to accept that he is being overwhelmed by someone he considered insignificant. Rode asks whether that is really the kind of strength he normally uses during friendly training, since a blow like that could send another student to the hospital for a month. Even after that, some students try to defend Kaya, claiming that he probably held back to avoid hurting Rode. Irritated by the provocation, Kaya gathers even more strength and prepares a series of attacks. He charges forward using the chain fist technique. Dozens of punches fly toward Rode in rapid succession. While avoiding the strikes, Rode analyzes his opponent's durability and concludes that Kaya should not break too easily. Determined to end the fight, he concentrates strength into his own fist. Rode hits Kaya with a single blow and sends him flying. Seeing that the young man endured the impact, he smiles slightly and decides to increase his strength a little more. In the stands, some students continue cheering for Kaya without realizing who is actually controlling the fight. Road takes a firm step forward on the arena floor. Brushing the dust from his uniform, he looks at Kaya and asks whether that is all he can do. Lying on the ground and sweating, Kaya realizes that Road still does not have a single injury even after facing his strongest technique. Road raises his fist and says that after taking so many attacks, it is finally his turn to strike back. Realizing that her master is about to attack seriously, Eleanor covers her eyes, worried about what might happen to Kaya. Road quickly moves forward, remembering that he would have preferred to remain discreet, but he needs to impress Margaret if he wants to obtain the Tear of the Dead. His punch tears through the air with such force that the wooden floor begins to crack. An enormous pressure descends directly toward Kaya. Convinced that he is about to be hit, Kaya screams in fear, but Road's fist stops only a few millimeters from his face. Even without touching him, the air pressure generated by the strike tears across the arena and destroys part of the wall behind him. The shockwave still sends Kaya flying backward, causing him to roll across the floor. The young man lies sprawled across the arena, completely unconscious from the shock and force of the attack. Anna freezes, unable to believe that Road defeated Kaya like that. Claire also realizes once and for all that Road's performance at the tavern had absolutely nothing to do with luck. Some students rush over to Kaya and begin complaining, asking why Road used so much force in a training duel. They accuse Road of deliberately humiliating Kaya and insist that the outcome would be different in a real fight. Soon, a crowd begins surrounding him, demanding an apology and even mocking the fact that he was sent away from home. Road watches their hypocrisy and thinks that in his previous life, he probably would have already summoned his undead army to deal with all of them. Before he needs to respond, Eleanor steps forward and tells everyone to shut up. Road looks at her in surprise, not expecting the girl to get involved in the confrontation. Irritated, Eleanor asks who they think they are to judge Road like that. She reminds him that Kaya's attacks were dangerous as well and asks what would have happened if any other student had taken those blows. The students are left speechless when they see someone of Eleanor's status openly defending Road. Ignoring their comments, Eleanor takes Road's hand. She pulls him away from the crowd and says that those people are not worth wasting time on. The two leave the arena together while the students remain stunned and Kaya stays unconscious on the floor. Later, covered in bandages, Kaya stares toward the exit Road passed through and fuels his desire for revenge even further. Near the gymnasium entrance, Margaret watches Road walk away with a satisfied smile. After what she witnessed, she confirms her suspicions about the boy and decides that she can finally introduce him to the academy's old professor. Walking through the hallway sometime later, Road asks Eleanor whether defending him like that will cause problems for her. He reminds her that House Ashblade maintains good relations with allies of Kaya's family and that her actions could damage those alliances. Eleanor simply laughs and replies that she never liked that spoiled boy or his family anyway. She also makes it clear that House Ashblade now stands with Road, even if that means severing ties with other families. Road looks at her thoughtfully and asks whether she is sure about that decision. Eleanor replies that thanks to Road, her grandfather has fully recovered his strength, so the family no longer needs to fear possible retaliation. Remembering another matter, Road takes one of the black mana stones from his pocket and says that he needs a favor. Out on the balcony, he explains that someone is using black mana to prepare something important, and Eleanor assures him that House Ashblade will investigate everything they can. Meanwhile, Kai is sitting in an armchair inside his dark room, still covered in bandages. He activates a magical communication device and contacts his older brother to ask for help. Consumed by anger, Kai explains that Road publicly humiliated him in front of Eleanor. He adds that the two seem close and insists that his family cannot allow such an insult to go unanswered. On the other end of the communication, Kai's brother listens to everything while standing before his family's emblem. After hearing the story, he informs Kaya that a man named Rennie will be passing through the region and may visit him. Surprised, the boy asks whether he means the famous assassin known throughout the Empire as Dire Wolf, and his brother confirms it. Kaya begins laughing, convinced that with someone of that level involved, Road will disappear without a trace. Back at the academy, Road arrives at Margaret's office. He enters the room and finds the teacher waiting near the window. Margaret admits that she was impressed by his performance during training and also makes it clear that she believes Road was the one who defeated the ancient knight in the forest. Road avoids the subject and simply says that he put in the effort because of her promise involving the Tear of the Dead. Margaret then explains that the artifact belongs to a former professor at the academy and asks Road to follow her. Along the way, she warns him that this master has a rather difficult personality. The two arrive at the academy's Magical Research Institute, a laboratory filled with potions, bottles, and research materials. Inside is Professor Gustav, an old man with a white beard who is completely focused on his alchemical experiments. Margaret tries to introduce Road, but Gustav immediately complains and tells them not to interrupt his work. She explains to the boy that the artifact he is looking for belongs to that very professor. Margaret also warns him that Gustav is quite eccentric in that from this point on, obtaining the Tear of the Dead will depend entirely on Rude. While observing the laboratory, Road notices a dead cat on the workbench and recognizes from the magical circuits that Gustav is researching resurrection magic. The professor pours a green liquid over the animal and continues the experiment in front of them. Using a magnifying glass, Gustav carefully examines the cat's eyes while small sparks of green mana flow across the workbench. Suddenly, the life potion reacts with the magic circle and causes a green explosion. Margaret is startled by the blast and calls out to the professor. With his face covered in soot, Gustav complains that he failed again, since the ancient texts claim that life energy should stabilize a soul. Margaret quietly explains to Rode that the old man is obsessed with research into resurrection and soul control, although he has yet to achieve any results. Observing the experiment, Rode thinks that this world's knowledge of souls is extremely limited, which helps explain why a true necromancer has never appeared there. Gustav looks at the bottle and begins wondering whether he simply used too little potion. Believing that there was not enough life energy, he pours even more liquid over the cat. A second explosion occurs almost immediately, shattering bottles and filling the laboratory with smoke. Rode immediately understands the problem, using life energy on a soul that is already dead, like trying to combine opposing forces that end up canceling each other out. Frustrated by yet another failure, Gustav asks what he did wrong since he followed the ancient text exactly as written. Rode decides to intervene and suggests that he stop using potions infused with life energy. Irritated by the comment, Gustav says that despite all of Margaret's praise, a student has no right to interfere with his research. He also asks what a boy who has not deeply studied soul theory could possibly know about resurrection. Losing his patience, the professor dismisses them and tells them to come back another time. Rode remains calm and explains that for a life that has already ended, that life energy acts more like poison than fuel. Gustav becomes furious at the comparison and reminds him that he is using water from the fountain of life, taken from the ancestral forest and capable of treating even fatal injuries. Rode explains that they first need to accept death as a fact and analyze the soul from the perspective of the undead, suggesting that they add soil from an ancient cemetery to the formation. Margaret grows nervous at her student's boldness and whispers a contradicting Gustav like that is not a good idea. To her surprise, however, Rode's explanation makes Gustav stop and consider that perspective. Willing to test the theory, he takes some soil from an ancient cemetery and carefully spreads it over the cat's body. The animal begins floating as an aura of spiritual energy surrounds its body. Gustav is completely shocked when he realizes that for the first time, the experiment seems to be working. Margaret is also left speechless when she sees that Rode's suggestion actually produced results. Rode, however, realizes that the cat's soul dispersed long ago, so the soil alone will not be enough to bring it back. Without the others noticing, he channels his own mana as the sovereign of the undead and takes control of the ritual. With his eyes glowing blue, Rode gives a silent command for the scattered soul to return to the body. Streams of spiritual energy gather over the cat, reconnecting the fragments of its soul to the vessel. After a powerful green flash, the animal opens its eyes. The cat lands on the workbench and meows normally, although Rode realizes that its soul will only remain inside the body for 7 days. Gustav and Margaret stare at the living animal, unable to believe what they just witnessed. Ecstatic, the professor grabs Rode by the shoulders and asks his name and where he learned that theory. Margaret smiles and formally introduces the boy as the student she mentioned before, Rode Morris. Gustav calls him a genius, claiming that the idea not only made his research succeed, but also contradicted one of the traditional principles followed by archmages. Margaret becomes even more surprised to see Gustav, known for being extremely demanding, praising a student like that. The old man asks Rode to share more of what he knows, but Rode modestly replies that he simply views the undead from a different perspective. At that moment, Gustav remembers that Margaret mentioned the boy's interest in the tier of the dead. He takes out a glowing artifact covered in ancient runes and shows Rode the item he has been searching for. Gustav says that he is willing to give it to him under one condition. The request is simple. The professor wants Rode to become his personal research assistant. Gustav promises that if Rode accepts, he can keep the tier of the dead and will also gain access to much rare materials for his research. Rode considers the offer excellent, especially because of the possibility of obtaining resources that are difficult to find. Margaret protests, asking how Gustav intends to turn a freshman to his assistant, but the old man simply tells her to be quiet. Irritated by his rudeness, Margaret merely grumbles about how stubborn the professor can be. Rode bows respectfully and accepts the offer, saying that it will be an honor to work alongside him. Internally, he becomes even more satisfied when he realizes that he now has an official title and access to a private laboratory inside the academy. Gustav gives the boy a golden key and explains that he can use the laboratory whenever he wants. He then officially declares Rode his chief assistant. Margaret can barely believe that her own student has just become Gustav's assistant, practically making the two of them colleagues within the institute. 2 days later, the scene shifts to the Crystal Tavern at night. On the upper floor, Kaya drinks a glass of wine while waiting for someone. A waiter announces that the man he was expecting has just arrived, and Kaya tells him to let the guest inside. The door opens and a figure covered by a dark cloak enters the room. It is Rennie, a sinister-looking assassin who smokes while wearing elegant clothes. Kaya stands up to greet him and comments that he has heard many stories about the legendary direwolf. Rennie tells him to cut the flattery and explains that he only changed his route to the north because Kaya's brother asked him to. Kaya is bothered by the way he is being treated but tries not to show it. He places a bag of coins on the table and explains that it is the advance payment, along with information about the target. Kaya hands him an image of Rode and describes him as a useless student from a declining family. Realizing that the target is only an academy student, Rennie tosses the paper aside and considers the mission ridiculous. He says that he has no time for childish disputes and that someone like Rode does not seem worthy of his services. Kaya tries to convince him by revealing that Rode has grown close to the Ashblade Harris and that the job also has his brother's support. Upon hearing the name House Ashblade, Rennie finally begins taking the matter more seriously. Out of consideration for Kaya's brother, he accepts the mission but demands 5,000 gold coins for the job. Kaya immediately agrees, saying that he will pay whatever is necessary as long as Rode dies. He only demands that the assassin leave no traces that could implicate House Shadowthorn, and Rennie assures him that professionals never expose their clients. Before leaving, the assassin confidently states that he has never failed a mission. Alone after the conversation, Kaya believes that this will be the final night of Rude's life. Later, Rennie appears masked on one of the city's rooftops. Wearing a red mask, he watches the streets while mentally reviewing the information he received. According to Kaya's information, Rode passes through that dark alley every day on his way home. When he finally spots his target walking alone below, Rennie thinks about the 5,000 coins he was promised. Rode walks calmly, thinking about how Gustav has been taking up so much of his time with research that he still has not been able to use the Tear of the Dead to strengthen Bladeseat. Along the way, he senses a strange presence and realizes that someone is approaching. Roney analyzes the killing intent and estimates that the enemy is at the peak Novus Archmage level, even above Margaret. A shadow moves rapidly across the rooftops while following his path. With his hands in his pockets, Rode confirms that he is the target and even considers whether the assassin could be connected to the magic circle destroyed in the forest. Without showing any concern, he decides to simply ask the intruder himself. Standing atop a wall, Rennie draws his blades and mocks Rode for choosing such a dark alley to die in. Rode simply gives him a cold look. Rennie grows even more irritated when he realizes that the boy does not appear frightened. He then leaps from the rooftop with his blade surrounded by a dark aura and launches his attack. The assassin activates Shadow Assassination and aims directly for Rode's neck. A powerful impact breaks the silence of the night, followed by a few drops of blood falling onto the stones of the alley. Rode catches the blade with his bare hand and grabs Rennie by the neck, demanding to know who sent him. The assassin is terrified when he realizes that a simple student just blocked his strongest technique. Rode shows no concern and simply throws him away. Rennie lands awkwardly on the ground and tries to recover. Realizing the boy's level of strength, he assumes that Rode is an intermediate archmage hiding his power and decides to flee. Using his shadow techniques, Rennie races through the alley in an attempt to escape. Rode watches him flee and warns that if he refuses to talk willingly, there are other ways to get answers. A wave of necromantic mana spreads across the ground and reaches the assassin. Bladeseat emerges from the shadows in front of Rennie and completely blocks his escape route. The mercenary panics when he finds himself facing the undead warrior surrounded by blue flames. Without difficulty, Bladeseat pins him against one of the walls. He then lands a heavy blow against the assassin's chest. With his sword near Rennie's throat, Bladeseat asks whether he is finally willing to talk. Even while injured, Rennie tries to maintain his composure and threatens Rode, saying that those responsible for the mission will take revenge. Rode approaches and warns that if he continues refusing, he will extract the information another way. He extends his hand toward the assassin's head. Rode activates Echo of Memories and enters Rennie's recent memories. Inside his mind, he clearly sees Kaya offering thousands of coins for the assassin to eliminate him. Upon discovering that Kaya and House Shadowthorn sent an Archmage-level assassin after him, Rode's expression turns cold. Feeling his mind being invaded, Rennie begs for mercy and threatens that Lord Bruce will not allow this. Rode replies that he does not need to worry because House Shadowthorn will not remain standing for much longer either. He then comments that the soul of a Novus Archmage will be rare food for his servants. One of Rode's necromantic servants devours Rennie's soul and ends his life. The assassin's screams fade through the alley as his energy is completely consumed. Rennie's lifeless body is left lying on the ground. With the problem resolved, Rode begins thinking about what he will do next against the enemy family. Since House Shadowthorn is one of the major powers in the north, he decides to act cautiously and choose the right moment. Meanwhile, Kaya remains at the Crystal Tavern, drinking calmly while waiting for news. Convinced that Rennie has already completed the job, he celebrates early, believing that Rode will never stand in his way again. Excited by the supposed victory, Kaya orders invitations prepared for a grand celebration banquet the following day. The next morning, luxurious invitations begin being distributed among the academy students. Eleanor looks at her own envelope in confusion, unable to understand why Kaya suddenly decided to organize a party. At that moment, she looks toward the entrance and sees Rode arriving. Her face lights up, and she greets him enthusiastically. Rode notices that Eleanor looked worried before seeing him and asks whether the envelope in her hands is the reason. She explains that Kai decided to hold a banquet for no apparent reason and invited practically the entire class. When Eleanor asks whether Rode plans to attend, he makes it clear that he dislikes the host and has no interest in the party. Even so, he suggests that she go because he already has an idea of the real reason behind the banquet. Eleanor notices that Rode did not receive an invitation of his own, but he replies that this is exactly what he expected. The girl finds it amusing and concludes that Kaya is still acting childish because of the defeat he suffered. That night, several nobles begin arriving at the luxurious hall chosen for the banquet. At the entrance, a guard demands that everyone present their invitation and makes it clear that no one can enter without authorization. Eleanor identifies herself as a member of House Ashblade, presents her invitation, and informs him that Rode is accompanied accompanying her. The guard hesitates when he realizes that the boy does not have an invitation of his own. Before he can make a decision, another employee approaches and whispers something in his ear. The man's attitude immediately changes as he opens the way and welcomes Eleanor and her companion. As they walk toward the hall, Rode thanks her for the help and Eleanor apologizes for the minor inconvenience at the entrance. While the party continues, a partially open door reveals that private conversations are also taking place throughout the mansion's hallways. In one of the rooms, Kaya asks his subordinate whether Rennie still has not returned. The man confirms that he has received no news and raises the possibility that the assassin may have failed against Rode. Kaya tells him to shut up and reminds him that Rennie is one of the most famous assassins in the entire empire. Still convinced that nothing went wrong, he orders them to keep the final payment ready for when the assassin appears. In the main hall, dozens of aristocrats enjoy the food and drinks at the celebration. Kaya watches the party with satisfaction, believing that with Rode out of the way, he can get closer to Eleanor and move forward with his plans against House Ashblade. Some guests, however, are still quietly discussing why such an extravagant party was suddenly organized. Walking through the hall with a glass in her hand, Eleanor notices unusual movement among the guests. On the other side of the hall, Kaya spots her and decides to take the opportunity to approach. He walks over smiling, raises his glass, and invites Eleanor to have a drink with him. The girl immediately refuses, making it clear that she is not interested. Before Kaya can insist, a voice behind him comments that he would gladly have a drink with the young master. Kaya freezes when he recognizes a voice he never expected to hear at that party. Turning around, he finds Rode standing behind him with a glass in his hand, calmly staring at him. The shock is so great that Kaya stumbles and falls, causing his own glass to shatter on the floor. Pointing at Rode, he asks in fear whether he is looking at a person or a ghost. Rode approaches and sarcastically asks what he thinks. Unable to hide his panic, Kaya says that Rode should be dead and asks what happened to the assassin sent after him. Rode pretends to think for a moment and asks whether he means the man who attacked him on his way home. He then throws Rennie's broken blade in front of Kaya. Upon recognizing the weapon, the young man finally understands what happened to the assassin. Shocked, Kaya demands to know how Rode managed to deal with someone at that level. Rode does not answer and simply stares at him in silence. Eleanor also recognizes the weapon as belonging to the famous assassin known as Direwolf. Realizing the situation, she turns toward Kaya and demands to know why he has any connection to a criminal like that. Surrounded by other nobles, Kaya tries to justify himself by claiming that it is all just a misunderstanding. Eleanor does not believe him and shows her disgust when she realizes that he went so far as to hire an assassin to eliminate Rode. With nowhere to turn, Kaya begins apologizing, but his attempts only humiliate him further in front of the guests. Eleanor loses her patience and tells him to stop talking. She says that she does not want to hear any excuses and states that she has already realized the banquet was prepared to celebrate Rode's supposed death. She then reveals that she already spoke with her grandfather and that from that moment on, all ties between their two families are severed. Kaya is consumed by rage and blames Rode for destroying all of his plans. Eleanor simply turns her back on him and asks Rode to leave with her. The decision shocks the guests, and one of the noblewomen asks Claire, who Rode really is, for Eleanor to break an alliance because of him. Claire admits that she does not know either, realizing that this Rode seems completely different from the boy she once knew. Outside, Rode and Eleanor walk together through the night, leaving the banquet behind. Still irritated, Eleanor complains about Kaya's arrogance and says that someone like him could never understand Rode's true strength. Rode, however, analyzes the situation more calmly and observes that Rennie was far too experienced to act solely on the orders of a spoiled young man like Kaya. He believes Kaya may not even be at the center of the conspiracy, and that House Ashblade itself could be involved in the enemy's plans. Eleanor agrees and questions how they imagined they could seize her family's assets, simply because her grandfather had been weakened. She thanks Rode once again for curing the patriarch and even increasing his power, reaffirming that House Ashblade will follow his orders. Hearing this, Rode thinks for a few moments about what his next decision should be. With a cold gaze, he orders House Shadowthorn to be completely eliminated. Later that same night, the scene shifts to the Shadowthorn estate. Inside the mansion, a figure in the shadows holds a magical communication artifact that begins to glow. On the other end, Kaya informs his brother that Rennie failed and that Rode appeared alive at the banquet. His brother refuses to believe it, reminding Kaya that he personally chose that assassin, and that even advanced mages would have difficulty surviving one of his attacks. Kaya insists that he is telling the truth and also reveals that the Ashblades severed ties with the family because of Rode. Realizing the severity of the situation, his older brother announces that he will return immediately to deal with the problem. Kai is relieved to hear that his brother is coming back. With that, he regains his confidence and once again believes that Rode will not escape this time. 2 days later, the story returns to the Academy laboratory. Rode finds it strange that Kaya and his family have remained completely silent since the alliance was severed. Knowing his rival's pride, he suspects that this calm is hiding some kind of move. Gustav interrupts his thoughts by excitedly announcing to the assistants that everyone needs to prepare to leave. A red-haired assistant asks where they are going, and the professor explains that their research has consumed almost their entire stock of materials and that they need to visit the magic market. Rode shows some curiosity, and the senior assistant explains that this market is a center reserved for people with high status or great power. As Gustav's new assistant, Rode will be allowed to accompany them and see the place for himself. He is surprised because he had never heard about such a market in the north, not even during his previous life. Shortly afterward, the group enters a carriage and begins their journey. They arrive in Nate, a major commercial hub in the north where merchants from many regions gather, and almost anything can be purchased by those with enough money. As they walk through the busy streets, the assistant explains that mages from across the region visit the city in search of rare materials. The group heads toward the imposing main building, where the entrance to the market's most exclusive area is located. At the reception desk, a bearded employee immediately recognizes Gustav. He welcomes the professor enthusiastically, making it obvious that Gustav is a well-known and respected customer there. Seeing this, Rode hopes to find the materials he needs to make better use of the Tear of the Dead when strengthening Bladesy. Shortly afterward, the manager appears elegantly dressed, greets Gustav, and offers his assistance. Having no patience for formalities, the professor asks to be taken directly to the intersection because he has no interest in the ordinary goods displayed in the main hall. Surprised by Gustav's direct manner, the manager simply asks the group to follow him. They arrive in a restricted area filled with relics protected beneath glass cases. Gustav examines the items and quickly says that none of them catch his attention. He asks for materials rich in life energy as well as resources related to death, such as soil taken from ancient graves. Rode examines the products and even notices a rare swamp crocodile bone, but considers the material quite ordinary. After looking through the rest, he concludes that the market has yet to show him anything truly impressive. To Rode, a truly rare artifact must possess power capable of achieving extraordinary things, something people would be willing to kill for. At that moment, Gustav's assistant begins arguing with an older man over a vital crystal she found first. Rode asks who the man is, and she explains that he is Professor Ball, Gustav's old rival from the Carroll Institute. Everyone's attention turns toward the supposed vital crystal, a green stone radiating an intense glow. After examining it more closely, Rode immediately realizes that it is nothing more than wind or disguised by an elven enchantment. Unaware of this, Gustav glares at Ball irritably and complains that his rival always tries to take anything that catches his interest. Ball replies that the merchandise belongs to whoever pays first and mocks Gustav for taking too long to buy it. Gustav begins losing his patience while his rival laughs in front of him. Rode discreetly approaches the professor and quietly informs him that the crystal is fake. Surprised, Gustav asks whether he is certain. Rode confirms without hesitation. Understanding the situation, Gustav realizes that the stone is worth nowhere near the requested 3,000 coins and decides to let his rival complete the purchase. With a slight smile, he calls the manager over and publicly asks who officially owns the mineral. Somewhat uncomfortable, the employee explains that according to the market's rules, the object belongs to whoever completes the payment first. Ball proudly displays the stone and states that he has already paid for it, making him its official owner. To everyone's surprise, Gustav bursts into laughter and says that he could not be happier with the outcome. Both Ball and the manager are confused by his reaction. His rival begins growing suspicious, unable to understand why Gustav seems so pleased after losing a supposedly valuable item. Gustav then congratulates him for just spending 3,000 gold coins on a simple piece of wind ore. Ball and the manager are left speechless by the accusation. Trying to hide his nervousness, Ball laughs and accuses Gustav of making excuses because he cannot accept defeat. He points toward the stone's intense glow and claims that such life energy could never come from an ordinary mineral. The manager also intervenes, asking Gustav to be careful with his accusations and reminding him that the market's own specialists evaluated the crystal. During the argument, Rode steps forward and asks his professor not to worry. He calmly states that the stone in Ball's hands truly is nothing more than wind ore. The boy certainly irritates both Ball and the manager. Ball demands to know who Rode thinks he is to interfere in a conversation between experts. The manager also asks the young man to watch his words, claiming that he is attacking the establishment's reputation. Gustav steps in front of Rode and declares that the boy's knowledge of this subject surpasses even his own. Ball laughs and says that his rival must truly have lost his mind if he made a mere student his chief assistant. He then points the crystal at Rode and demands that he prove how a stone containing so much energy could possibly be fake. The mineral continues radiating a powerful green glow, apparently filled with life energy. Rode explains that the elves placed an illusion over the cheap ore, and that all they need to do is drain the energy sustaining the enchantment to reveal its true appearance. For that, a small amount of soil taken from an ancient grave will be enough. The manager nervously confirms that they have the material in stock and orders someone to bring a container. Shortly afterward, a bowl filled with dark soil is placed on the table. Rode asks them to place the crystal inside it and assures them that the truth will appear in about 1 minute. Ball accepts the challenge and demands that Gustav and his assistant publicly apologize if the stone turns out to be genuine. He then places the green crystal directly onto the soil. During the first few moments, the object continues glowing normally. Ball begins mocking them, pointing out that the supposed life energy remains completely intact. Seeing this, Gustav begins showing some concern. His assistant also becomes anxious, afraid that the professor will be humiliated in front of the entire market. She whispers to Rode that Gustav has never been able to accept losing to Ball, and that a defeat at that moment would be terrible for him. Rode tells her to stay calm and says that the illusion should disappear in about 10 seconds. Ball continues taunting them, claiming that not even elves would be capable of faking a mineral with such a convincing life aura. Suddenly, the manager's eyes widen when he notices a change on the table. The green glow completely disappears, revealing nothing more than a gray stone with no value whatsoever. The assistant confirms that it truly is wind ore and wonders who is responsible for evaluating the item. The surrounding customers begin commenting indignantly about someone paying 3,000 gold coins for a practically worthless stone. Ball turns pale when he realizes that he truly fell for a scam. Furious, he charges toward the manager and begins accusing the establishment of selling fake merchandise. Gustav bursts into laughter and thanks Rode, relieved that he was not the one who bought the stone. Consumed by embarrassment, Ball throws the mineral onto the floor. Before leaving, he threatens the group and says that this will not end here. After Ball leaves, the manager bows before Gustav and Rode and apologizes for what happened. Outside, Ball walks away consumed by rage, convinced that their dispute is far from over. Inside the shop, Gustav remains satisfied after finally watching his old rival suffer such a humiliating defeat. As thanks, he tells Rode that he can choose any material he wants and that the laboratory will cover the cost. Gustav continues mocking the management over the mistake, while the employee nervously assures him that the fake stone was an isolated incident. The professor simply grumbles, still suspicious, and continues walking with Rode. The manager watches the boy walk away and wonders where someone capable of detecting a fraud that fooled even the market's experts came from. In a darker part of the shop, a helmeted figure watches Rode from a distance. It is the very man responsible for tampering with the war, now irritated because the boy ruined his scheme and even triggered an investigation. Noticing Ball's hatred, he begins thinking about using the professor himself to get rid of Rode. Meanwhile, Ball angrily crosses the city square. He continues dwelling on the humiliation and cannot accept that Gustav managed to find such a perceptive assistant. The professor also regrets losing 3,000 coins and fears becoming a laughingstock at his institute if the story spreads. At that moment, someone calls out to him in the street, causing Ball to stop and look behind him. An armed man approaches and introduces himself. Irritated, Ball asks whether the man works for the market and warns that he intends to discuss compensation only with management. The man asks him to calm down and claims that the administration is seriously investigating what happened. He then lies, saying that the evaluator responsible for the crystal had been secretly communicating with Gustav's new assistant. The story makes Ball stop and reconsider the entire situation. He asks whether the man is implying that the fraud was planned from the beginning specifically to deceive him. The stranger pretends to be innocent and says that he is only passing along information without drawing any conclusions. Even so, he points out how strange it is that a mere student could be so certain about a fraud that even the specialists failed to detect. Ball lowers his head and begins laughing as he considers the possibility. Convinced by the lie, he concludes that Rode must have been involved in the scheme and that Gustav merely pretended to be surprised in front of him. After accepting this version of events, Ball asks why the man came to tell him everything personally. The man explains that if news spreads about a fake stone being sold by the market, business will be seriously damaged. Ball understands what he truly wants and realizes that the two of them share the same enemy. The man confirms it with a smile. Ball walks away consumed by anger and promises that Gustav and Rode will pay for humiliating him. He also swears to show both of them the price of crossing him. The man watches the professor leave, satisfied to see his plan working. A smile appears on his face when he realizes how easy it was to manipulate Ball. Meanwhile, Gustav and his group continue exploring other stalls scattered throughout the market. The professor crouches in front of a merchant and begins examining several materials displayed on a rug. He picks up a volcanic heart but realizes that the stone has already lost all of its magic and is nothing more than an empty shell. Gustav also discards a dried and deteriorated nightmare vine, considering the material useless. Rode begins thinking that he will not find anything interesting there until he senses a different kind of energy in the area. He stops when he notices a powerful aura of life magic coming from a fossilized black piece of wood lying on the ground. Rode recognizes the material as bloodwood, an extremely rare element formed only in places where extreme forces transform into one another. Rode realizes that the fossilized rock contains an enormous amount of life energy, making it perfect for stabilizing souls and life magic research. At that moment, another object lying beside the rock catches his attention. It is an artifact made of bone with a small fragment of purple gemstone embedded in a skull. Rode recognizes a fragment of infernal ore inside it, an extremely rare material capable of greatly strengthening his necromancy. To avoid drawing attention, he picks up the materials and asks the seller for the price, pretending that he only plans to use them to support a few tables in the laboratory. The merchant laughs and explains that the stones came from ancient abandoned tomes in the north, but the appraisers found nothing special about them. Because of that, he asks for only 5 silver coins per piece and lets Rode choose as many as he wants. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Rode offers 50 silver coins for the entire lot. The seller accepts immediately, convinced that he just made an excellent deal. Rode hands over the money and completes the purchase of the treasures without raising any suspicion. As they continue through the market, the assistant complains that the visit has not yielded many useful materials for Gustav's research. Rode then hands a fossilized rock to the professor and reveals that it is bloodwood filled with life energy. Gustav looks at the object suspiciously and says that it looks like nothing more than an ordinary piece of stone. Rode patiently explains that it really is bloodwood, only fossilized after a very long time. Intrigued, the old man takes out his monocle and begins examining the material's structure. As soon as he channels energy into the rock, the object reacts and releases an intense crimson glow. The assistant is surprised when she feels the enormous amount of life energy emanating from the material. Gustav also remains silent for a few moments, observing the energy reflected in his lenses. Shortly afterward, he excitedly admits that Rode was completely right. While the two celebrate the discovery, Rode discreetly looks at the bone artifact he purchased, knowing that he found something even more important for himself. With those new materials in hand, he knows that he will be able to greatly increase his own strength. That night, Rode returns to the residence where he usually trains away from curious eyes. Analyzing his resources, he calculates that the Infernal Fragment can help him reach the Novus Mage stage, while the Tear of Death will allow Bladeseat to advance to the advanced rank. Bladeseat kneels before his master as a magical aura begins filling the room. Rode hands his servant the blue stone and orders him to use that energy to recover more of his former strength. Bladeseat obeys and crushes the crystal in his hand, beginning to absorb all the power stored within it. Life energy and black magic spread throughout the room during the process. A massive cocoon of blue energy completely surrounds the warrior's body. A few moments later, cracks begin appearing across the magical structure. The cocoon finally shatters in an explosion of purple energy. When the energy dissipates, Bladeseat reappears even taller and more imposing than before. Rode observes the result with satisfaction and confirms that his servant has reached the advanced rank. With Bladeseat's evolution complete, Rode picks up the purple fragment of infernal ore and decides that it is his turn. He crushes the mineral in his hand, releasing a dense wave of purple energy. Black magic and purple lightning surround his body as the energy is absorbed. Rode feels the power flowing through his veins as the process approaches completion. After finishing the absorption, he reaches the Novus Mage stage without difficulty. Now stronger and with Bladeseat at the advanced rank by his side, Rode evaluates his new abilities. Satisfied, he realizes that he can finally use more complex spells that were previously beyond his reach. Meanwhile, a luxurious procession arrives at the Shadowthorn estate. A man wearing military boots steps out of the carriage while the mansion guards bow before him. It is Bruce Shadowthorn, Kaya's older brother, and one of the most influential figures in the family. Kaya runs over to greet him, clearly relieved by his brother's return. Bruce, however, shows no sympathy and demands to know how Kaya managed to be humiliated by Rode, and even calls the Ashblades to sever ties with them. Kaya tries to justify himself by saying that Rode is far more dangerous than he appears, that Rennie disappeared, and that the rival family has already begun freezing their business dealings. Bruce becomes thoughtful when he realizes that someone so powerful appeared in the north without ever catching his attention before. After a few moments, he clenches his fist and declares that Rhode's identity does not matter. To Bruce, the boy must die for interfering with the family's plans to control the entire North. He then calls for his trusted assassin, causing a man in a suit to step out of the shadows. His name is Lex, an elite assassin trained for extremely dangerous missions. Bruce reveals that Lex is at the peak of the expert mage rank, possesses a blue blessing, and was responsible for training the late Rennie. The assassin approaches with such a threatening presence that even the allies around him become tense. Kaya feels a chill when he realizes that Lex is on a completely different level from the previous assassin. Adjusting his blades, Lex asks for all available information about Rode so that he can avenge his former subordinate. Kaya excitedly replies that he has already investigated the boy's entire routine. He then places a complete dossier on the table for Lex to study the target. Bruce looks through the information and mocks Rode after discovering that he is now the personal assistant of the former headmaster. Considering Gustav's political influence, he concludes that attacking inside the academy or setting up another simple ambush in the streets would be far too risky. The best solution would be to lure Rode into territory controlled by the Shadowthorns. Kaya then suggests sending an official reconciliation invitation to House Ashblade. His idea is to pretend that they want to apologize, lure their rivals to the mansion, and create an opportunity to eliminate the old patriarch. Kaya likes the possibility of solving every problem at once, while Bruce considers the plan in silence. After thinking for a few moments, Bruce approves the idea and decides to prepare a decisive attack. The goal will be to eliminate their enemies all at once and clear the way for the Shadowthorns to dominate the north. The next morning, the scene shifts to the Ashblade estate. Eleanor finds her grandfather reading a letter and asks what caught his attention. The patriarch explains that Kay has sent an apology and offered 20% of the family's properties as compensation. Eleanor does not believe it for a second, saying that someone like Kaya would never make such an offer willingly, and that it clearly looks like a trap. The patriarch places the letter on the table and calmly analyzes the situation. He agrees that the proposal is probably bait and asks Eleanor to consult Rode before they make any decision. The girl immediately agrees and goes to find her master. After hearing the entire story, Rode also finds the offer of 20% of the family's assets highly suspicious. To him, the Shadowthorn's strategy is far too simple and predictable. Even so, Rode smiles because that trap could also be the perfect opportunity to eliminate his enemies. The next day, a House Ashblade carriage arrives at Rode's residence to pick him up. One of the guards greets him and informs him that they came to take him to the event. Adjusting his clothes, Rode calmly comments that it is time for the banquet. The Ashblade patriarch admits that he feels much safer with Rode by his side. Since their enemies still believe that he is weakened, the old man intends to use that advantage to catch the Shadowthorns off guard. That night, they arrive at the enemy family's mansion, which is surrounded by heavily armed guards. At the entrance, Bruce welcomes the guests with false cordiality and apologizes for the recent conflicts. Even while maintaining a polite demeanor, he believes that he will be the true winner that night. Bruce has complete confidence in the combination of the anti-magic circle prepared inside the mansion and Lex's abilities. In his mind, he already imagines Road dead once the trap is activated. Road easily notices the killing intent hidden behind the welcome but shows no concern. Everyone heads into a luxurious hall where a massive table has been prepared for dinner. Continuing his act, Bruce once again apologizes for Kaya's behavior and proposes restoring peace between the families. He invites everyone to sit, and Road calmly takes his seat. With his sharpened perception, Road identifies 7 hidden magical points throughout the hall, forming a powerful anti-magic circle. Even after noticing the trap, he simply tells Eleanor to stay calm. The girl agrees and relaxes slightly when she sees that Road remains completely composed. Bruce and the Ashblade Patriarch raise their glasses and make a toast at the table. The old man then asks about the 20% promised as compensation. Bruce laughs and pretends that he almost forgot the most important part of the agreement. In the next instant, his friendly expression disappears. He claps twice, giving the agreed signal. Lex, disguised as a waiter, approaches carrying a tray with a supposed property transfer contract. The Patriarch reaches out to take the document. At that moment, Lex's hand becomes surrounded by a murderous aura accompanied by purple lightning. The assassin launches his attack, revealing that it is not a contract at all, but a trap to kill the Patriarch. His blade shoots directly toward the old man's face while he remains seated holding his glass. A powerful impact erupts in front of the Patriarch at the exact moment the attack should have struck him. To Lex's surprise, his blade is repelled by an invisible barrier surrounding the target. The Patriarch calmly stands up as a powerful aura spreads across his body. Bruce is left speechless when he realizes that the supposedly weakened man is now at the peak of the expert mage rank. The old man laughs and reveals that he was healed by a grandmaster, becoming even stronger than before, while mocking his enemies for finally showing their true intentions. Seeing that the initial ambush failed, Bruce drops all pretense and orders Lex to attack alongside him. The two charge at the Patriarch at the same time. The old man simply smiles at their approach. Confident in his new strength, he taunts his opponents and prepares to face them. At that moment, the hidden formation between the ceiling and floor is fully activated. The Patriarch realizes too late that his enemies prepared an anti-magic circle. The barrier immediately begins suppressing his power, preventing him from channeling spells. Bruce bursts into laughter and reveals that he spent a fortune on the formation specifically to neutralize the old man's power. Realizing that her grandfather has lost access to magic, Eleanor panics. Even without being able to cast spells, the Patriarch uses his physical abilities to avoid the first attack. Understanding the danger of the situation, he shouts for Eleanor to escape immediately with Road. With tears in her eyes and sword in hand, the girl refuses to abandon her grandfather. Eleanor asks Road to escape alone, declaring that she will stay there and fight alongside the Patriarch until the end. Road, however, simply steps in front of her and calmly asks her to move back. Eleanor tries to explain that the circle is nullifying all magic and insists that he leave while he still can't. Road ignores the warning and keeps his eyes fixed on Lex. Upon noticing him, the assassin immediately charges forward, recognizing Road as the boy responsible for Rennie's death. Driven by his desire for revenge, Lex unleashes a direct strike at Road. A loud metallic sound echoes throughout the hall as his blade is blocked before reaching its target. Lex steps back in surprise, unable to understand how someone apparently at the novice rank managed to stop his attack. At that moment, the shadows behind Road begin to materialize, revealing the imposing figure of Bladeseat. Surrounded by a threatening aura, the servant declares that anyone who raises a blade against his master deserves